This conference will now be recorded.
Even any luck?
No, I think we're just going to have to, we'll run without it. I'm glad the video, just no,
Yeah, looks like
no
you're
sound,
muted.
unfortunately. Still can't hear me?
We can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, all right, good. I thought I was playing with something there and it muted me again. I just couldn't get the audio going, Casey,
Hey,
but
Stephen, I
there
think
we
you're
go.
muted. I can't hear you.
No, we can hear him.
Ashley, you can hear me then, you said?
Yes.
Casey, can you hear us? Derek, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Sean.
I can hear you, John.
I can hear every single person talking.
Yeah, I think something's going on with Casey's computer, maybe.
We can hear Casey, but he can't hear us, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because he gave me screen control. I don't know how to give it back to him.
He should be able to call. Sometimes it's in settings to reset it, the audio.
That's weird.
Derek, can you ping Casey and let him know we can't hear him? He can't hear us. Oh, he looks like he's logged off.
I'm in the process of texting him right now.
Casey, can you hear us now? Casey, you back in business yet?
He said he's making me the organizer right now.
Derek, let me know if you're good to go to start the meeting.
Yeah, I'm just, 1 second. So, Stephen, am I just making you presenter? Is that correct?
Yes, sir, whenever you're ready.
Derek, that'll be later. That's like the 5th
Oh.
item on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, Stephen.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, you can start, Sean. I don't have any materials I need privy to right now. It's just all generic stuff for the first few items.
Right. All right, well, I'll start the meeting and then hopefully Casey can rejoin.
Yep.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting of February the 16th, 2021. To start the meeting, will you please stand if you can and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded using GoToMeeting. So we can have as smooth a teleconference as possible. Can you please note the following? While listening, please keep yourself muted to eliminate distracting background noise. Each agenda item requiring a vote will proceed with a motion and a second by a board member, followed first by board member comments and questions, and then second by public comment and questions before a roll call vote is taken. When wishing to speak, please address me as the meeting chair requesting to comment and announce your name. And note that there is also an open public comment period at the end of the agenda. Very good. So the first item tonight is a discussion of the Westchester University Overlay Project, proposed zoning amendment. It's been a little while since we talked about this topic, and I believe Kristen Camp is with us to, first of all, remind the board and the attendees what this project was about and where it stands currently.
Thank you, Sean. This project probably started in 2017, I believe. Yeah, it did, middle of 2017, where it was as a result of an application or two applications that had been filed in West Goshen for two projects that Westchester University wanted to, an office building or administrative building. I think actually both of them were administrative office buildings on Rosedale Avenue. There was also an application that was filed in the borough of Westchester for the Commons building that's currently under construction. And each of the municipalities had their own zoning ordinances, their own regulations as to how an educational use could be approved. It required conditional use approval from the governing bodies. West Goshen felt that it, had a stake in the application that was filed in the borough and hired special counsel to participate, and vice versa. The borough hired special counsel to participate in West Goshen's hearings. And when we were handling the West Goshen hearings, we realized that your current regulations for educational uses really don't work for a campus-wide setting. There's a minimum, basically anything the university does is considered an educational use. There's area and bulk requirements that don't really fit necessarily to all of the different types of uses the university would be looking to do. And that became very apparent with one of the applications where they were looking to convert an existing dwelling into just an office building for some administrative support staff. They needed, I think, 22 variances. And they went and they got those variances. And then they came to the board and we started a conditional use process. and it got very contentious. So I don't think they ever went forward with it. But as a result of that, there was also a sort of a separate parallel path that Mayor Comita had started called BUOG. And it was basically the governing leaders of the borough, West Goshen, and the university, just coming together and talking about all issues to work cooperatively together. And one of the things that came out of that was this idea of having campus ordinance, a campus-wide ordinance that crossed municipal boundaries. That's not common. And so what West Goshen and the borough did was create a task force and hire an architect, a land planner, actually, Bernard and Haber Holloway. Tim Cassidy was hired as the professional land planner to sort of look at other campuses that may cross municipal boundaries and come together, with all of the different players and draft an ordinance that, for all intents and purposes, would be the same as far as the regulatory process of how new land uses would get approved for the university. And what we came up with was this concept of a master plan. So the university would assume they had a 5-year plan to build three or four different buildings that cross both West Goshen and the borough. They would put together a master plan. Accompanying that master plan would be studies that dealt with their future enrollment, their housing needs, their transportation demand, their parking analyses, stormwater management, overall concept. And again, recognizing that what they build in West Goshen has an impact in what happens in the borough and vice versa. One of the things that became apparent in the borough's Commons project was that they were building a parking garage to meet parking requirements for the borough zoning ordinance, but yet they have parking structures in West Goshen that are being underutilized or not utilized at all. And if they could just find a way to get people that park in the West Goshen garage to be able to walk or bike or have some sort of transport, they would need to build and spend a lot of money on a garage that creates more impervious surfaces, et cetera. So again, the concept of recognizing the campus as a campus and having consistent zoning made some sense. We worked through that. We had some issues with both municipalities, with neighbor groups being concerned about certain issues. And I think we addressed those. Our last, with this organization was to talk about setbacks and buffers and things like that. The West Goshen ordinance creates 4 different districts, PUC 1 being closest to the campus, PUC 2 being a little further out, PUC 3 being further, and PUC 4 being along your I district along Matlack. Within each of those PUC districts, you identify the specific uses that would be permitted. And all of it has to be done through a master plan process. The master plan would get conditional use approval by the board, and then they basically would have their zoning locked in for a period of 5 years. If there were substantial changes to some of the assumptions and the studies that were presented as part of the conditional use, they'd have to go back and revise and bring you up to speed on what those changes were and see whether or not that impacts their zoning approval for the master plan. Your planning commission reviewed it and recommended approval. We were getting ready to bring it to you to consider authorizing advertisement for a hearing. And what happened was the borough council held a hearing on it. And at that council meeting, or council hearing, actually, it was brought up that you had a proposal to have student housing, multifamily student housing in the PUC 4. And the borough felt very strongly that that was going to impact the residents that live on Walnut Street. And they basically wanted to hold off and have further dialogue and conversation to see exactly what you were going to do if you were going to move in that direction. Since that time, the borough has basically put it on the back burner. I think if you were to ask them today, they tell you they're not looking forward. They're not planning to adopt this. They actually are doing a comprehensive entire new zoning ordinance that they're rolling out next week at a task force meeting. And it does not incorporate anything with respect to the campus overlay. We had a meeting with some representatives from the Borough Council and West Goshen Board and the University Council, and the council member most impacted if student housing would be permitted in the PUC 4, Michael Stefano, he voiced some concerns and expressed, what he hears from his constituents. Mr. Nagel, representing the university, was asked to go back and see if there was any changes or tweaks that could be made to the ordinance that could address those. We've not seen anything yet from the university, but in talking with staff and Mr. Nagel, even today, I'm not certain, and I'm not saying this because I've had any further dialogue with the boroughs, that I'm not certain whatever is put into that would be enough to get it to change the council's mind to move forward on this overlay ordinance. So where you are is you are back to what we had in place in 2017, where any use that the university wants to make, it requires conditional use approval as an educational use. It's likely it would require variance relief because some of the area and bulk requirements don't fit to a lot of the lots that they'd be looking to build on. And you'd be back where Westchester Borough would probably likely intervene in your proceeding and seek party status. So, I think, and I've talked to your staff, I do think there's merit in moving forward. Even with the way it is drafted, there'd be some tweaks that would have to be made, obviously, to not have a contemporaneous review by the borough. But I do still think this master planning concept is a great idea. I think part of the struggle, from my perspective of looking at what happened in the past, is that the university did planning, but they weren't necessarily sharing that with West Goshen or the borough for that matter. So, they might have ideas of future things. Obviously, they have funding constraints, being, funding from the state. So they have timeframes for when they can, commit to doing certain road improvements or pedestrian connectivity improvements. But if they provide that up front as part of their planning, then everybody can work together towards a common goal. And that's recognizing the university is there, recognizing the university may have to expand in some fashion, but doing so with a recognition of that there are a lot of residents that abut up to, where these university uses are, and really getting, appropriate buffers and setbacks and other conditions imposed if the university were to move forward and build more buildings within their campus. So I still think it's worthwhile. I think that if you choose not to go forward with the draft that we have, then we need to go back to the drawing board and take a look at what your existing regulations are and decide how those should be changed to really accommodate future growth. And I don't say growth in a way of, you're pushing for the university to grow. It's more just a recognition that the university is there and that it will at some point want to modernize or build buildings. I mean, it has come to West Goshen on several occasions and asked for you to change the ordinance to allow uses along Matlack Street where currently they're not permitted. So it's really just trying to be proactive and plan appropriately for what we believe will be coming. One of the big issues, and I'll stop after this, is that BET, a separate private entity, has also come, I think they came to your June work session. They have an interest in purchasing the parcel. Actually, I think they might have already purchased it next to the edge where it's currently a multifamily development that caters to students. They'd like to build a second building called the Edge 2, and that would require a zoning text change to allow multifamily. There were some discussions about whether, if you were to allow multifamily, would it be something that would have to be managed and controlled by the university? I think the takeaway from the board's work session was that you would encourage private developers to be able to build that kind of a building so that you keep those properties on your tax rolls. So I had sent a list of what I consider policy decisions for the board. And one is, do you still want to have a edit to the ordinance? If so, is it in the format of requiring master planning and conditional use approval? And part of that is defining what student housing is and where you would allow it to be, location-wise, ownership-wise, and area and bulk standards. Those are really the key points, I think, for board discussion this evening.
Thank you, Kristen. That was a good recap of the journey we've been on here with this process. It's, as you said, been going for some time. So board members, do you have questions for Kristen around what she's just explained and the current status?
This is Robin. Kristen, can you give us an overview of what you think it will take to get us to the next stage in terms of the information that we need to gather? Are we going to continue to gather information from the university to somehow be still kind of in connections with respect to the build out going forward?
Well, no, you would put the ordinance in place. You would adopt the ordinance, which your planning commission already reviewed it. So if you were to make significant changes to it, we would take it back to your planning commission. The Chester County Planning Commission also already reviewed it and issued a review letter. So you could actually authorize for a hearing. Because it does create an overlay on several parcels of property, you would have to send notice to those property owners 30 days in advance of the hearing. and their properties would have to be posted 7 days in advance of the hearing. But once you put the ordinance in place, the information gathering that you get is when the university decides to go forward and try to get zoning approval for a new development. The ordinance would be in place, and they would have to provide to you all the different studies that are required to accompany a conditional use application as part of a master plan. And I did ask Brian Nagel the question last week. I think I shared it with staff as to whether the university, and Brian said he was going to probably join in. I can't tell if he's on. If the university still was on board, because obviously it's your discretion as to how you zone, and I do think that the way we've drafted the ordinance is lawful and comports with the MPC, but the quality of the materials that you get from the university really relies upon them buying in and agreeing that this master planning process is beneficial for all. And Mr. Nagel did indicate that, yes, they're still willing to go forward with that planning. I think the preferential on at least West Goshen and the university's part is that, recognize what we said, it is a campus that crosses boundaries, and if you can get the borough to tie in and buy in, that would be even better. But they are still willing to go forward with it and cooperate and do what your ordinance calls out.
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Nagel. I just wanted to let everyone know that I am here, and I can address a few of those points, and I'd like to when it's appropriate for me to do so.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Welcome. Let's see if there's a couple of the board questions first, and then maybe you'll have several questions to answer. Other board members, questions for Kristen at this point?
Well, I would just like to throw this out. As a board member, my concern is for the residents in the Roslyn neighborhood. I want to ensure that the university is limited in their ability to expand into that neighborhood, and that we would have something put in place to direct where that expansion would occur, recognizing the needs that the university has. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'll be right upfront about that. With that being said, we spent a lot of time and money when developing the ordinance that right now is kind of like in a state of limbo. I'd like to see us move forward with it. I think we can move forward as the West Goshen Township unilaterally without the borough, and put an ordinance in place that would establish a relationship with the university, which I think could be a good relationship for both. But like I said, my primary concern is that of the residents within the Roslyn neighborhood. But I think we should move forward with this ordinance because I think it has a lot of worthwhile features to it.
Thanks, John. Ashley or Hugh, any questions?
No questions. The comment is to emphasize what John said, that having grown up in Roslyn, I'm absolutely in favor of protecting the area from the encroachment of the college.
Kristen, what were the last, when you first re-examined this and explained it to everybody, you ended with, we have two options. Can you just repeat kind of what step we need to take right now?
Well, so the one option is to move this particular ordinance forward and authorize advertisement for hearing and do all the necessary procedural requirements to be able to adopt a zoning ordinance with zoning map changes. The second is to throw it out and start over and look at your ordinance and decide how else, besides doing a master plan, how else you would allow educational uses or specific university uses to be approved as far as the zoning perspective. And the third option is do nothing and keep your ordinance exactly as it is today.
Right. And the only reason that we would possibly revisit the ordinance is because the borough's pulled out, or, I mean, has anything changed significantly?
No, I think it is that the borough, when we started this path in 2017, it was with the goal that both municipalities would have almost identical ordinances as far as definitions and the process to be able to get development approved. They only have what they call the super block. It would be one zoning district, where yours would have 4 different districts. But as far as identifying uses and requiring a master plan to be approved through a conditional use process, the different types of studies and application materials that have to be submitted with the conditional use, all of that is the same. It was the same in both ordinances. Okay. And let me just jump into real quick on John's point. if you recall, the residents hired a land planner, Dave Babbitt, and he had come up with some suggestions, and we actually dialed back on the boundaries, I believe, of PUC Class 1 based on comments and concerns of the residents in Roslyn. And also there were other, at the last time where we were looking at specific language in the ordinance, we beefed up is the word I use, but we added additional setbacks and protections that I think were as a result of trying to protect those neighbors.
Okay, I have two questions, one for Kristen, I think one more for Brian. So Kristen, you mentioned that the borough is in the process of looking at its zoning now. What is planned around the needs of the university in terms of either the master block or other other ways that the university needs to work with the borough in terms of zoning, whether that's student housing or other facilities it may need? What is their approach to this?
They're going to keep their ordinance intact. So their district today is considered, the super block is considered the institutional district, and it allows educational uses by conditional use, and they would keep those provisions intact. And they would, I don't think there's any changes that they made to what's in their ordinance today going forward into the new. I think they literally cut and pasted, because what they were doing is, and I wasn't involved in it, my colleague Tom Esty was, they were keeping this draft, this campus overlay, sort of as a chapter that they were going to insert into the total rewrite. And when things went sort of south, they basically said, okay, well, we'll just keep the provisions relating to the institutional district the same. And there aren't any edits that were proposed as a result of that. So, that they may go back. I mean, they may have the same conversation you're having and say, okay, well, if we decide not to go forward with campus overlay, let's, have a subcommittee come together and look at how we should be zoning for the super block. But that conversation has not occurred yet.
Okay, and then Brian, I'll start off a question for you. Maybe other board members have some for you too. Is it feasible to do the master planning that was originally envisaged for this kind of three-party cooperation if the borough is just basically staying with what it has in terms of its zoning, and if this West Goshen overlay was to proceed as is, can you do master planning, or is it corrupted in some way?
I think the answer to the question is no. We can still engage in meaningful master planning. The borough, I mean, it might be worthwhile to look at the provisions that talk about providing copies to the borough, but it doesn't hurt them to have a copy. I mean, they're going to get a copy of everything that's submitted to the township. The township's going to get a master planning document that shows what's planned over a certain horizon of time, 5 years or whatever it might be, and that'll be beneficial for the university. It'll be beneficial for the township. It'll be beneficial for the residents. I think it really serves everyone who's interested in this. And I do want to point out, Kristen gave a very good summation of the history. There was a lot of pressure on the development area that's in front of the Roslyn neighborhood, and frankly was in the Roslyn neighborhood prior to this ordinance coming to fruition. And with the participation of the township and the university, and as Kristen said, the residents and the planner who they hired, what was actually envisioned changed, and the developable area within the Roslyn sector was squeezed up toward Rosedale Avenue, really to the great benefit of the residents of the Roslyn neighborhood. And what allowed for the alleviation of pressure there are the additional uses that are permitted in the PUC 4 district over off of Matlack Street. So really, it still comes together. It allows for the master planning. It takes the pressure off of that Roslyn area, It gives the township and the university some good planning and direction. There were a number of projects. Those projects haven't gone off the books. They were put on hold, some 4 years ago to go through this process. So it's very important to the university that they be able to move forward. And it's not beneficial to the university, to the residents, to the township, or really anybody if the university has to do its planning through mass variances because the township ordinances don't accommodate the reasonable use and changes at the university. So I think this really serves all purposes. I think it's a good idea for everyone, for the township to move forward with it. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
I have one other follow-up question, Brian, for you. Student housing in PUC 4, what is the current status of housing from student housing from the university's perspective? And do you consider that one of the key elements of what you would like to see be resolved in this process?
The current status is that the university does need to be able to house the students, and we do feel as though the student housing element that's in the township's current draft is important and beneficial. And again, the same thing. It acts as a benefit to the township, the residents, the university, because it's part and parcel of that pressure relief by allowing some of the student housing over in that PUC 4. So we do think it's important. We do think it's beneficial.
And sorry, John, but just one more question for Brian. Last time we talked with the borough about the situation with student housing in PUC 4, we tried to brainstorm whether there was options that the university could help in terms of this concern around student foot traffic up through the neighborhood, Walnut Street, etc. And you'd indicated potentially there was, that there would be consideration in this process where the university might provide a shuttle transport from that Matlack Street area during those evening weekend hours when that foot traffic might be most problematic to residents. Is that something that could still be made part of how this process moves forward?
Certainly. There were some things that we had talked about. I would think that the township and the university, and in the event that you've got a private developer of the student housing, I would think certainly that those three groups could put their heads together to come up with things to address those concerns. And look, the university still wants to work with the borough, still wants the borough to encourage, we want to encourage the borough to move forward with more insightful and better planning for the university. As Kristen said, in their current new zoning draft, they don't have any new provisions for the university. We don't think that's a good idea. We think they should be more proactive, as the township has been, and as they were when we started and went through this process. And we want to move forward in good faith to address their concerns so that hopefully they come back to the table to get their side of this thing done as well.
Thank you. Other questions from the board for either Brian or Kristen?
Yes, Sean, I'd like to just follow up the questions that you had about student housing. But before I do, would there be any willingness on the part of the university to include a shuttle service between any student housing that may be developed within the PUC4 area into the Westchester borough area with some kind of a regular schedule? Is that something the university would be willing to do?
Mr. Hellman, it's hard for me to answer that question right now when we don't have any active project in front of us. But like I said, we're willing to consider cooperation on a number of levels. I don't have the answer to that specific question, but I believe there are things that can be done, and I believe it can be done in cooperation with the private developer, with the university, potentially with the borough, and certainly with the township. So keeping in mind that this has to go through a conditional use approval, the township would still retain the ability to impose reasonable conditions on the master plan approval. And all of those things could be fleshed out in that process if those are things that the township is looking for in the context of a particular project or really in the context of the master plan itself.
Okay. Student housing, is the university considering building student housing itself?
I don't know that there's a project on the books, but they're always looking at what they need to do to provide housing for their students. And it depends on, constantly changing circumstances. One of the things that's a benefit about the master planning document, about this ordinance that you're considering, is that all of that information is something that the township has to, that the university has to compile and supply to the township as part of a master plan approval. So all those things will be looked at, and I know you're familiar with some of the provisions of the ordinance and some of those details that have to be provided, but those are the kinds of things that we get that are a benefit of this more sort of thoughtful master planning that the ordinance contemplates.
Brian, didn't you though previously?
It's one last question. If a private developer were to do student housing in the PUC4 area, what do you envision would be the university's relationship with that private developer and the operation and maintenance of that development?
I mean, that would be subject to discussions between the university and the township and the private developer, but the university certainly would like to have campus police presence, and the university would like to have RA presence, so that they can serve their function in managing their students along with the private operators.
So there would have to be a contractual relationship between the university and a private developer in any student housing that would be done in the PUC4 area. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, there would have to be some kind of an arrangement to make that happen. That's correct.
Okay.
And you can't force that. I mean, there's no way that the West Goshen can't force a private developer to enter any sort of an agreement with the university. That would go beyond a zoning regulation. And one question I have for Brian, just for clarification, I thought at another meeting, a question was asked as to whether or not the university are they in the business of building student residence halls? And I thought the answer was no, they don't do that anymore. They can't get funding and they rely upon third parties to do that.
That's correct. But that doesn't mean that they don't think about how to provide the housing and work with others to make sure it's provided. I mean, that's the housing that's in the borough, the newer housing. I mean, even though those buildings are owned and operated by another entity, they were done in coordination with the university.
Right, but I just want to make clear that it's not. It almost made it sound like an answer to Mr. Hellman's question that it was as if the university itself or the Commonwealth was going to be building them, and that's not the case.
Definitely not. I'm sorry if I intimated that. I didn't mean that at all. That's not the case. You're right, Kristen.
Kristen, if I could jump in, this is Michael Markman. We're the owner of the Edge at Westchester, and we are the applicant for the additional student housing. So currently, we run the student housing ourselves, and I think people from the township can attest that it's well run, it's safe. I mean, what we try to provide is a safe, clean environment for students to live in that, we want to expand, obviously. I can also tell you that we've been in discussions with the university for a couple of years now about actually being more collaborative on what we're doing there. And the discussions are probably on a monthly basis at this point. Our idea is to expand the current student housing we have. And we're open to ideas on collaboration with the university, and we have been having discussions. So generally, we just want to expand it. But if you look at our track record and our operating history with the current Edge at Westchester, and you can talk to anybody in the township, it has been, a very safe place, and there just hasn't been a lot of incidents there. So,
John, may I chime in?
Go ahead.
John, yeah, I'm glad Michael's on the line. Michael and I have had several conversations with regards to this project, and some public-private partnerships that they may be able to participate in as part of this. One of the biggest problems that we have in this area, and our responsibilities as the public administrators, is to solve problems. We have a huge housing crisis for student housing. The housing's not going to go away, which is kind of what made Westchester Borough want to go away. They didn't want to give up anything to add student housing. They didn't want us to do student housing. And BET, I have to say, out of all 10 apartment complexes that we have in West Goshen, the Edge is the best managed. We have very few, if any, incidences because they police their residents. You know, if a student acts up, they're gone. No questions asked. They kick them out. And Michael and I had some discussion after we had our joint meeting with the borough, and we talked about some, shuttling, and we also discussed maybe BET providing some type of offset to help the police department with some funding, because I knew that was a concern that the borough had. So those are ideas, and BET does have some good ideas, and I'm glad Michael's here tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. This is a bit of a question that probably doesn't really have an answer tonight, but one of the things that residents often talk about in West Goshen is, when it comes to these higher density housing developments, is can the infrastructure manage it in the areas, whether that's roads or whatever else? And while recognizing that there's a crisis today with student housing, things can change over time, 10, 15 years from now. What happens if the university requirements for student housing isn't as great as it is today? What would happen to these properties that are approved and built for student housing if the demand is no longer there? What would be the consequences of the ordinance we have and the need to utilize the property for something else?
I guess I could jump in with that. And we own a fair amount of student housing. We also own a total of about 4,000 market rate apartments. And, the way you're building them now, you might have an extra bathroom in there, but if in fact they had to be converted to apartments, they could be. But we haven't seen a situation, especially in a place like Westchester. So we have student housing down in South Florida, which there's a lot more of it here. I can tell you with our particular project, I have 15 beds available for next year in our project. So we are all leased out except for 15 beds in our entire project, which is something like 459 beds. So I can tell you that this type of living, and I can tell you, we're probably about 70% women too, because parents feel that their daughters are safe there. It's a long way away here, at least, from being saturated, because there's not this high-end student housing living that creates this kind of environment. And as far as the infrastructure, we did actually do a traffic study, and we compared the traffic generated by this project to the existing flex building and the counts there. And it's 2017, but it's probably more accurate because you can't count now because of COVID. And it's a very similar amount of traffic put on the street with this as there was with the existing building when it was full. So
I just want to share a couple of thoughts, Sean, if that's all right.
Go ahead, Ashley.
So I just, for the record, I do want to say that I'm in favor of moving forward with this ordinance as it is. I remember we had many long conversations about all of these aspects months and months ago. Our prime objective in West Goshen is to take care of the people who live here and have their best interests in mind, and B, be fiscally responsible, and C, to be good neighbors to the people around us. By moving forward with this ordinance, I hope that as good neighbors, we're not going to see the kind of infringement on the Roslyn neighborhood that we have been talking about, that the university will instead expand onto that Matlack Street area. I know that we've already addressed the setbacks. And I thought that at the end of those discussions, we had come to some sort of understanding back then. With all due respect, growth is not going to stop, especially in Westchester. It's just not going to. Students are going to keep coming, COVID or not, and it's going to get even more packed, and they need to live somewhere. This isn't a luxury apartment complex like what was being proposed at the Quality Inn site. This is a student housing complex that's pretty much on campus. That's going to allow kids to walk safely from that part of Matlack Street over to the university. So I don't know what kind of traffic concerns would come from that. I know that obviously people are going to be parking at the edge, but my point is that I'm comfortable moving forward. And whatever discussions that we might want to have with the edge, down the road about shuttle services, I think would be excellent. I figure by us being, good partners and acting in good faith, that they will as well, and that the university will as well. So I'm comfortable moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Kristen, so we've heard from most of the board tonight. You were looking for basically with staff to get direction from the board as to whether we wanted to continue to proceed with the ordinance as written, right?
Correct.
Okay, so at this point, is there any other board comment? Otherwise, I'd like to open it up for some public comment. Hearing no other board comments, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on what you've heard tonight and the general view? I believe the board is considering moving forward with this ordinance to the next step. Is there any comments from the public?
Sean, this is Doug.
Go ahead, Doug.
Sean, in the PUC Class 1, there's still 3 private residents within that class. Are those folks okay with being in that class?
So Casey or Derek, do you have any comments about spot zoning with the way PUC 1 was laid out, or comments about those residents being aware of the situation?
Yeah, I don't believe they could be excluded due to, we'd create individual parcel islands of separate zoning, and you can't do that.
Are the residents aware that they would be in the PUC 1?
They were all contacted 6 months ago, and then a year ago, we've been discussing this. One is the chiropractor. He's been trying to sell to the university for some time. I don't believe we've received any negative comments.
I only have one. I only have one property owner in the last draft.
I was actually just going to say, Kristen,
112 West Rosedale Avenue. Michael Kennedy.
The latest rendition only had it down to one non-university-owned parcel because everything else got taken out in the latest rendition of the PUC 1. So, and that was a parcel that it couldn't be taken out physically. So I think it's down to one parcel.
Yeah, and that's a commercial use anyway. So
yeah. Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
This is William Ron. I go by Alex. 834 Spruce.
Go ahead, Alex.
Had some interaction with Casey on the chat, so I'm not sure this is appropriate for this discussion, but any opportunity to discuss traffic through Roslyn and cut through, just want to bring up, there's been some concerns with the overlay and how it might increase traffic. You mentioned it during some of your comments around infrastructure, namely how folks cut through down Roslyn on the Spruce and then cut up to 202 or a new street. I know you changed some roads over the years to one way to address some of the traffic. So probably a discussion for another time per Casey's comments, but any opportunity to address that in the future would be appreciated. Also, with that in mind, just a little side tangent, both Derek and Casey have been great in other things from questions on permits to some other stuff, very responsive, and you guys do a good job on your website as well.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your comments. You're correct. It probably is a subject for another day with the existing issues of students from the south, from the housing on the south, they're cutting up through the neighborhood. I know it's a perennial problem and it's frustrating for some of the residents, but probably not relevant to the ordinance tonight. Any other questions from the public?
Supervisor, John Malala.
John, hi, good evening. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that I'm representing the university, and we have been in excellent talks with Michael and BET about the proposed housing piece, and we are committed to continuing to work with them, the township, and the borough to try to make that the best possible experience for all parties involved.
Thank you, John. Are there any other public comments?
Good evening.
16 South Church.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Caller 3, go ahead.
Church, that's me, Lou Heise, 16 South Church Avenue.
Hi, Lou.
We saw the, thank you, hi. We saw the document WC-overlay_2 PDF, but the link is broken to it. But I think if it's substantially what we discussed at the last meetings, then we certainly want to move ahead with the process rather than, the alternatives, which would be to go back to what we were doing before. I think it's what Kristen said earlier, that it's best to move ahead with it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to comment?
Hi, it's Margie Swart.
Go ahead, Margie.
Hi, just one request. I looked for a link to the overlay this evening before the meeting, and I may have missed it, but would you just make sure that it's posted to the website, especially if it's going to be advertised, that the advertisement is also, the ordinance is also posted online?
So I'm looking at this is Derek. I'm looking at the new website right now, and in the agenda section under meeting materials, the Westchester University Overlay Ordinance is the draft that we're discussing tonight is coming up for me.
Okay, maybe I did see the draft, but there wasn't a map attached to it, and I was actually looking for a map.
Okay, this is the materials I was given to put up, so I don't know about the map.
All right. Is it possible for the staff to go ahead and add the map to the website somewhere? That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. I'm sure that can be done in the next few days. So board members looking for direction for Kristen and staff here in terms of to continue to move forward with the ordinance. Is there anybody who does not believe we want to continue in this direction?
Well, I think we had a couple more public comments. Are you cutting off public comments now, Sean?
Thank you, Ashley. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak?
Sean, this is Doug. Just another quick comment, please.
Oh, wait, Doug, hold on a second. There's someone named Ms. Zaro who's been waiting to speak. Can you just hang on one second?
Hi, I'm Allison Zaro, counsel for BET. I just wanted to note that I was on this evening, and we appreciate the board considering student housing. The only thing I would say about the existing ordinance, and we had briefly discussed this when we had appeared at your work session last year, was making sure that if there is a private operator, that is clearly allowed within the confines of the PUC district. There was some discussion about the definition and whether that would allow a private operator to operate the student housing project. So as this goes forward, I would just want to put out there that I would want to coordinate with Mr. Nagel and your solicitor about making sure that fits into the components of this if the board is interested in seeing that occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Doug, you had one more comment?
Oh, yeah, Sean, thank you. Just wanted to ask if the master plan still goes out 5 years and good for 10 years, and if the abutting residences in the PUC Class 4 section were addressed.
Yeah, so at the workshop, Doug, my recollection was that we did address setbacks relative to the residences that abutted the PUC 4 overlay.
Okay.
And I believe there was no change to what we'd previously discussed in the duration and the period of time for the study and its impact. I think it's on page.
I think it's 5 years and it's good for 10 years.
Yes, that's right. It's on page 20 of the ordinance. Okay, so back to my, is there any other question? Is there any other comments, please? So back to my question to the board. Are we in a position tonight to direct staff and solicitor to move forward with continuing the process to enact this ordinance?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to move forward to enact the ordinance.
I'll second it.
There was a motion and a second.
Sean, can I make a comment?
Do we need a motion here, Kristen?
Well, I want clarification because I think Ms. Zara was correct that after the June work session, when BET presented, she had actually presented an amendment that would have created a student housing overlay. And that obviously was different than what this campus overlay does. But what I did with looking at that and working with staff, if the board's direction was to go ahead and allow student housing to be built by either a private entity or a public entity or in combination, that really should be looked at and make sure that the area and bulk requirements for that particular use would be, because right now, the way it would be done, it would be part of a master plan, but if a private entity is the one building it, they obviously can't provide all the reports and the studies that the university could. So there does need to be some tweaks made if the direction of the board is to allow student housing by a private developer in the PUC4. I actually went back, I had a draft pretty much done, and I know I circulated it with staff and we were waiting to talk about it. But that would be something that we'd want, direction from the board on. If you're willing to go in that direction, let us work with Ms. Zaro and Mr. Nagel and bring that back to your planning commission and you. And I don't think that's not like a 3-month process. That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Well, I just want to weigh in on that. If we're talking about allowing a private developer in the PUC4 area that does not have a contractual relationship with the Westchester University for student housing, I will not be for that.
So, okay. So I think it was, just speaking on staff's behalf, I think it was staff's opinion that having either the university or a private operator be able to do it made more sense than just giving the university total, carte blanche to control everything in the housing components in PUC4. So that was just a staff perspective. That's where I thought this was going. But obviously it's a board decision. But I think from a staff perspective, we felt comfortable with operator or university owned. But obviously the question on the table is for BET. So yeah, that's certainly a policy decision, as Kristen points out.
Okay, this is Brian. Can I just chime in on one thing, please? I think it's important to keep in mind the clarification that Kristen asked for earlier. The university will not own the student housing under any circumstances. I just want to make sure that that's clear. The university, there are other entities that provide student housing, but I think in this context, I think the university's expectation is that BET owns the real estate within the PUC4 where they'd like to do a project. I think the university is generally supportive of that project, but would like to participate with the before in terms of campus police, RAs within the building, and that can all be done, I believe, within the context of what Ms. Zaro mentioned, what Kristen referenced, that the three of us would be sort of trying to coordinate on. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. I don't think it means, Mr. Hellman, that coordination would still be there. I think it would be, but in terms of the ownership structure opportunities, I think the idea is to keep that flexible so that ET could do a project. If a university affiliate wanted to later do a project in another location within the same district, that would be on the table as well in the future potentially. No plans for that right now that I'm aware of, but just by way of example. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Hey, Brian, when you say university affiliate, are you talking about like the foundation? Are you talking about?
No, there's separate housing entities that exist for the benefit of the university students. And so those are the ones nowadays who would who would who would develop student housing and manage student housing for university students.
So I know that we're kind of going full circle here, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I thought that the whole discussion that we had was about the fact that if we could get private in, then we could at least collect the tax revenue off of those properties, and that's where we were all sort of heading. And I think that with the Edge, it's kind of the perfect situation because we get to do that, but they also have a great relationship with the university. So
yeah, I don't mean to suggest that's not where we're headed. I think that is where we're headed.
Okay.
Well, Brian, you're familiar with the definition of student housing. It's on page 9 of the draft. This is quite frankly something which you, I believe, developed. That's what we're talking about, at least in my mind anyway. And I'll just quote part of it. It says it can be a college or a university or a private entity which owns and operates student housing for college or university students recognized and approved for such purposes by the college or university at which such students are enrolled. I think that's what we're talking about. If there's something else we're talking about, then, well, that's where I think where the problem may lie.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, John. I don't think it's a problem. I think that's what Kristen was suggesting and Ms. Zara was suggesting we need to look at and just make sure that what we're contemplating fits within the current draft and the definitions.
All right, so as long as it fits that contractual relationship.
But I need to understand what the rest of the board members want. I need to understand if the other 4 board members are only willing to support student housing to the extent there's a tie-in with some management agreement or contractual relationship with the university.
I have to say, Kristen, it's a great question. And I'm thinking about it now, but I have to say I support John's position in this, in that what we don't want is student housing to be built with good intentions and then find out there is no RA, there is no campus security there. It falls on West Goshen Police to manage it. And it's basically student housing built by a private developer with no contractual or agreement with the university. I think that is a concern for some of the board.
So can I ask a question? Does the Edge have a contractual agreement right now with the university in any way, or is it an informal relationship?
No, we don't. It's an informal relationship. And I can tell you that we don't have those problems, but we do police our students and we have cameras everywhere. And to the extent the students do anything wrong, they're initially fined and then they're evicted from the property. So we do this, we run student housing and we do it effectively. And it has not been a problem because we are very strict. And I can say in some cases, we may be more strict than the university is in some instances.
Isn't there a way to vet third parties or not at all? Like once we make this decision to allow it, like it's a free for all, or is there a way to kind of vet this with the university and with the township?
Ashley, I don't understand your question. Do you mean rule out developers you don't want to see come forward?
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. That's up to the university. I mean, the way it's worded now, it's the university that has to have some sort of contractual relationship or, management contract in place. So it's the university to be vetting out the developer. But once you put it in place, you can't prioritize and only give certain developers rights under your zoning.
Yeah, that was my question. Yeah, I get it.
Sean, if I can chime in.
Go ahead.
Michael, through our when you and I had conversations, and you guys were in an initial conversation with the university, and it was going to be a public-private partnership with the 2 of you, it was my understanding that you guys would own it, the university would manage it. Is that still the way you guys are going with that? Because I would think if the university is managing it, it would be treated just as the some of the apartment buildings that the university already owns that are managed by the foundation, where they do have campus security that patrols the building. They have RAs. Will that be some type of similar? I think that might help Sean.
Yeah, you know what? We have no problem with that kind of arrangement. We're having conversations as to what level will the university completely manage it? Will they have RAs on site? Will they have, security patrolling it? But I'm open to any of that. If that's something that, the board feels more comfortable with, we can definitely incorporate those things. And, our conversations with the university would not preclude, those sorts of things. So I'm open to it.
Kristen, I don't mean to belabor this, but I'm just trying to understand it because I thought the board was going in an opposite direction. So is there any legal issues with that? I mean, can we legally say in this document that they have to have a relationship with the university? I mean, is there any issues there at all?
I mean, I think there's some legal issues. I don't really want to go into great depth at a public meeting about some of the concerns I have. I do think you can define, you typically don't define uses based on who the owner is, but in an educational university setting where you're drafting a campus ordinance and you want, I think, and the case is actually Mr. Nagel, I was rereading his memo that he provided to me on this issue. If the ownership of the use is part and parcel to defining the use, then I think you can make a distinction. So I think I'd want to look at that some more, but I also, Derek, and I'm really glad I raised the question because I thought there was a lot of conversation at the June work session that you were concerned about keeping on the tax rules and everything. So I wasn't totally clear on the board's direction. So I appreciate the conversation. But yeah, I mean, I'll look at that again, and I would want Allison and Brian to, us all to be on sort of the same page with that. But I think it's going to be along the lines of that having the tie-in with university does in fact, go in towards the use definition. So I think it can be done. The one thing that I am sitting here worried about though is how do we police that 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I mean, we're not privy, we're not parties to that contract. So unless there's some annual reporting and requirement that they continually keep us in the loop on their contracts, things change over time. So that's another thing I get concerned about is, watching the university and how its functions have evolved since I started working in the borough in '96. I mean, it changes. So we just have to be aware of that.
I guess the concern really, Kristen, here is the idea that once you've allowed student housing and you've opened it up to ability for a private developer to do student housing, it's great when you know someone like BET and the history and the performance is there, but this would allow a speculative student housing by a private developer along Matlack Street with no relationship to the university because they believe there's a demand that's still not being met for student housing, and it will become several potential buildings now that with no connection to the university and how it's run or whether it's truly a demand that's needed.
No, well, I don't agree. The definition would require it to be students. Number one, they'd have to be enrolled at the university. So it would have to be students. It couldn't be leased to other people. And then the second thing is I think because it's approved through a conditional use, you'd have the ability in your conditional use approval to tie in the safeguards that BET is now doing on its own when it's not mandated by your ordinance in terms of policing its students and that kind of thing. So you could handle it and you could address it.
But also, Sean, I guess my question is, who's to say that the university can't have a relationship with a developer maybe they think is good, but turns out to be awful? So that's still a concern even with a contractual agreement.
It's just the idea is about it being a partnership where the demand is being worked through the university with the private developer. The private developer builds and operates the facility. All's well and good. It's if there isn't one and we end up with speculative demand build for student housing, if, like Kristen said, if there are ways to control that in terms of how it's going to be established, then that's probably okay. It's just we don't want to really have a situation where there's just student housing being built when there's potentially not the demand for it.
Yeah, and to your point, Derek, suppose the situation occurs where it does go sour, but with the contractor relationship, you have something to fall back on, you have some leverage which you can apply.
John, what would that be though? The building's built, what's your leverage?
Well, the leverage would be between the university and the developer, not the township. That would be between the university and the developer. There's concerns I have. Residents within the neighborhood have raised these concerns with me. They want to see student housing being allowed that have some relationship to the university that can be defined, and how better to do it but through a contractual arrangement.
So hang on a second. Is it an option? Is it an option to do? I know you're talking about conditional use, a conditional use for BET, and then to just have it be university only.
I'm not following you. No, that you would define the use as something that would be allowed by conditional use, the student housing. The BET would be the applicant, and they'd have to demonstrate as part of their conditional use application that they have, the way the definition is today in the ordinance draft, that they have some relationship with the university for a management, or that they have they were given the blessing by the university to build these student homes to cater to and only be leased to students of Westchester University.
I frankly don't understand if a private developer wants to build a apartment complex for students, why would they have a problem in not having a relationship, a contractual one or something written between them and the university? I don't get it. I mean,
because I think a lot of private developers would not want, they want to do their own business. They have their own way of running their businesses. They don't want to be bound by a Commonwealth agency dealing with the university. And I'm not advocating, I'm trying to just show you some problems. I am not at all advocating. It's a policy decision for you. But I think sometimes they don't.
That's precisely my point. That's exactly my point. But yeah, the developers want to do whatever the heck they want to do. Once they get the thing built within the PUC4 area, if it's a private developer without any contractor relationship with the university, yeah, they're going to do whatever they want to do. Next thing you know, there won't just be students allowed to live in there, but anybody.
Well, no, that's what I said to Sean. The definition of the use still would be mandating that there be students there. So it can't be opened up to anybody. It would have to still be student housing. But I think you can and as I said earlier, you could also address some of the things that I think you're seeing as a benefit for the university being involved and having oversight and policing or whatever. You could potentially have as part of the conditional use decision conditions.
Well, I think we should.
Okay, maybe let me just wrap up where we are on this right now. So I heard overall that the intention of the board was to try to move forward with this, that the overall ordinance is in good shape, but with this one area of student housing where there seems to be a need to see if there's either language or something else that can clarify some of these concerns that we have or not. And the board will end up having to make a specific decision around student housing. Is there something here that you can work on, Kristen, with staff, or do you feel you've exhausted the language as best you can with what's in it today?
Well, I know how Sean and John feel. I need to know if Ashley, Robin, and Hugh want to only allow student housing in PUC4 if it's somehow tied in with the university. That's the policy question I don't know the answer to.
So Hugh, Ashley, Robin.
And by tied in, you mean contractually or like the edges now?
I mean, the way the definition is, and John was correct in pointing that out, the draft that was last before you, the definition of student housing says a building owned and managed by a private school, college, or university, or by a private entity which owns and operates student housing for college or university students, recognized and approved for such purpose by the college or university at which the students are enrolled. That language requires that the private developer have basically gone to the university and had some, and I'm not even sure that language is strong enough to accomplish what Sean and John want. So we'll have to think about that. But I need to understand if the other three board members are in line with where John and Sean are.
Well, from my perspective, I'd like to know more from the university about what we can expect from them in terms of what they're going to be asking of the developer. It seems like that's one piece of the puzzle where we don't really have an insight into what the university might do. If they're going to, I've heard things about leasing, wanting to manage them. It's not clear to me where the separation is between Toll Brothers and the university in terms of responsibilities.
BET, one Toll Brother.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Robin, this is Brian. I think the university's primary goal, and including in its discussions with BET, is to have some form of campus police presence and RAs. That's really what they're primarily focused on. I would say there's possibilities for other things, but those are the two elements that I think the university sees as really important, and other details could be worked out between the university and BET. But that's kind of what my understanding of right now where the university is in terms of what they kind of have on their list of what they expect or what they hope for in terms of their role.
And Brian, how is that done? Is that through some sort of contract that's annually updated, or how does that work?
Yeah, it would probably be a multi-year agreement.
Yeah. And would there be any, I guess one of the questions I would have is, if a student has an issue in the building, a disciplinary problem, does the university then take action with respect to its code of conduct and being able to, take disciplinary action against the student?
That's a question that has to be answered by the entities themselves, but I imagine that either entity would have the ability to enforce their own rules on some level.
Well, I can tell you, we had an instance like that. So we had a COVID positive person living at our property, and they were deliberately exposing themselves to their roommate. And we had discussions with the university about it, and the university supported us, and it was helpful in those discussions as far as telling this particular student he should not be in that situation, should go live at home until he's not, this was very early on, not COVID positive. So we have those kinds of discussions, and we have the back and forth where I get advice from them and they help. So it is collaborative. So anything like that would definitely continue, but we're open to kind of working through these issues with the university. And if they want RAs there, that's good. If they want the security there, that's good. That's all acceptable to us. So if you want to have those kinds of conditions as part of conditional use, that would be acceptable to us.
Okay, well then then that's fine. I think that's good.
Kristen.
I just want to say it's great working with you guys, but that's you guys. It could be somebody else coming down the pike that won't be as amenable and willing to work as you are. That's my concern. I mean, we have to come up with ordinance that's going to be in the books for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years down the road. So we have to look way far on down the horizon, not just look at what the situation is today. But thanks for your willingness to work with us.
But Kristen, quick question. Wouldn't every other developer still have to participate in the conditional uses?
Yeah. For this use, any other developer would need conditional use approval, correct?
Exactly the same as what it would be for BET.
Be the same process.
Right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, I wanted to add something to your question about disciplinary action. I attended a meeting with off-campus housing, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. It's the division that deals with the students off-campus housing through the university. And even the private housing that students occupy within the borough and within West Goshen, if there is a problem with a student in one of those houses, and I pass this information along to the police, all they have to do is send the student's name over to the university, and that student will be deferred to the university's conduct board for disciplinary action.
Okay.
So Kristen, did you get the answer to your question from the other board members?
I think so. I think I heard Ashley supports Sean and John, and Robin got a little bit more clarification. So I'm guessing she's also on that same support.
I am.
Okay.
Hugh, are you there? Do you want to comment? I saw Hugh had dropped off his phone line, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like he dropped off the call. Oh.
I'm back. I'm back. I'm on. Anyhow, yes, I agree. I agree with the other ones.
Okay. Yeah, so
Chris,
Sean, I think I have enough direction. I'll work with staff, I'll work with Brian and Allison, and we'll get something to you that we think accomplishes everything that you guys, there's not that much that has to change, but we will get that back to you so that you understand what the final product is. And we'll shoot to have that to you so that you can officially authorize us to take all necessary procedural steps to move it forward.
Very good. Thank you so much for working through that with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Good to see everybody. Good night.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
So I'm just looking for my agenda now. One of the reasons we had this is the first topic is we've tended to, actually myself had discussed the reason for putting these kind of topics first is that they generate a lot of discussion. There are a lot of points and issues to resolve. And if we leave them till later in the agenda after some of our regular reports, you know, the board's tired, the public's been waiting a long time. And we just wanted to change it up a little bit tonight and see if it worked in terms of having these more discussive topics earlier in the agenda. So thank you for persevering with us through that. And especially thanks to Chief Stephen Pellner, who is up next for our Westchester Fire Company presentation. Sorry, Stephen, you probably didn't realize you'd have to wait this long to speak, but thank you.
No problem. Very applicable to us as well. So we have a vested interest in the process there. Let me get up and running here. Sorry, it'll just be a second.
No problem.
All right, I don't know if you can see that there. All right, well, thank you, Casey. Thank you to the board for giving us this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the Westchester Fire Department. I'll try to be as brief as I can where we are at with time. So my name's Steve Pellner. I'm the current fire chief of the Westchester Fire Department. As chiefs, we serve a 3-year term. So I have 21, 22, 23. Also on the call tonight are assistant fire chiefs, Mark Scanlon, Mike DeMeo, and Justin McClure. You might have had a chance to meet Mike DeMeo in the past. He's our representative within our command staff for the direct connection with West Goshen. Our chaplain, Jerry Schwartz, he also is the coordinator for the county CISM team. So he works not only with fire, EMS, also the police department. So Chief Carroll has a lot of interaction with him as well. Our public information officer, Dave March, he's a chief communication officer for the Westchester Police Department, and also our public information officer, as we see here. Safety officers we added this year. We have Don Herb, who's a past fire chief. He's on the call and a West Goshen resident. And I must say everybody on this list out of our command staff, with the exception of 3 individuals, are West Goshen Township residents. Mike Cotter, as many of you know him as well. He's also part of the police department, and Martin Helmke as our safety officer as well. So I have a quick little video clip for everybody to watch. So just want to give you an essence of what the inside looks like, or inside fires, rescues, that sort of thing. Try to keep it as brief and as short as we could. So if you can hang in there, but it gives you a little glimpse of what we see on a day-to-day basis. So I will get this going here. Well, I hope that came through. I know we were having a little technical difficulties, but hopefully everybody can still hear everything that was going on there. But our department's made of 3 fire companies, individual fire companies that we work together to make the Westchester Fire Department. First Westchester Fire Company, which was incorporated in 1799. We're actually located in East Bradford Township on Bradford Avenue. Goodwill Fire Company is in the borough, established in 1833 on East Union Street, and finally Fame Fire Company in West Goshen Township at 200 East Rosedale Avenue. So we're 100% volunteer. We respond 24/7. We currently have 173 active members, 98 of which make all the minimum regular training and call requirements. The other balance of folks have things, family, careers, things change throughout the year, so they may not be able to make that, but we see a lot of ups and downs over the years with our volunteers. In 2020, we had 1,342 calls for service. 291 of those were in West Goshen Township, and out of those, 13 were assists to West Goshen Township. We're in service for a total of 669 hours. Pictured here is the fire we had on November 10th at the new elementary school, the new Greystone Elementary School. We had a fire on the roof there. That was back in November. As one of our local representatives coined the phrase, we're certified to serve. We're the first fire department in the Commonwealth to become 100% certified as far as minimum certifications when it comes to fire departments. So that was in 2010, and we've maintained that every 3 years. We have to go through a rigorous process to recertify, and we've continued that since 2010. Training, we're very extensive when it comes to training. Each station meets weekly, various weekends. For example, this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, the department will be getting together for a command class. Over 8,400 hours in 2020. We're normally around 10,000, but that number was a lot lower due to COVID. Pictured here is our fire school off of Snyder Avenue. We have a tremendous facility that we're able to train our folks and outside companies on our grounds. And below, recently this past weekend, we trained out at the North Hills Lake on ice rescue training. All of our members, I kind of alluded to it before, are not only obviously members of the fire department, but also the community. So we do a tremendous amount of outreach to the community. Pictured here, you see our Santa runs, which we have a great time with. Also some adopt families around Christmas time. So that's funds that the volunteers either raise or donate themselves to help less fortunate families get through Christmas. And then also you see here at the some fields where we helped with a backstop in West Goshen Township. So quite a few things we do throughout the year, not just fire-related activities. Our primary coverage area is 27 square miles, encompassing Westchester Borough, West Goshen Township, East Bradford, Westtown, Birmingham, and Thornbury. We split the township about 50-50 with Goshen Fire Company. On the north side, the split is Phoenixville Pike to 202. I know the maps are really small and tough to see here, but much like you saw with Good Fellowship's maps last month, similarly here with the split anyway for us and Goshen Fire Company on the north side. On the south side, 202 is basically the split east and west down the South Concord Road, just to give you a rough idea. There's some areas where it goes off of that, but just gives you a rough idea anyway. 20 pieces of apparatus we have throughout the fleet. I'm not going to read every one there, but our heavy trucks as far as our ladders and an engine and engines down to the boats and ATVs that we have at our disposal. Thankfully, our two brand new engines came in the last couple of weeks. One is going in service really shortly, but it takes a few weeks with upfitting and training to get those in service. But they were part of the 5-year contract that West Goshen is part of, and just wanted to give you an update on that. But that was a 1.55 purchase on those two apparatus that recently arrived. So they're a great addition to our fleet. The trucks they replaced were very tired, both over 20 years old. So they were greatly needed. Our squads are utility trucks. They're due for replacement. They're also part of the 5-year contract, $375,000 for the 3 of them. Purchase was delayed in 2020 due to COVID, but those purchases have been made and they're currently in production. So we should see them sometime in the summer. One final point I wanted to talk about is the ISO rating or Insurance Services Office. So third party that assists with homeowners insurance, at least insurance companies, as far as premiums. So something that we're all very important to all of us, but that score or that tally is on a 1 to 10 scale, closer to 1 to better. The ratings are calculated on how well the fire departments are equipped. But 50% of that looks directly at the fire department. So ISO comes in, they look at our training, they look at our folks, they look at our response time, they look at our certifications on our ladders, our pumps, our hose, that we're getting them tested by a third party. And all of our pre-plans, that sort of thing. 40% comes from our water infrastructure, whether it's a hydrant filled area or not, or we're using tankers. 10% comes from communication, so that's right from Chester County to 911 Center, and there's a chance for an extra 5.5% for community outreach, some of the fire prevention programs and such. We're a Class 3 in the borough. Class 4 in West Goshen, East Bradford, and Westtown, and Class 5 in Thornberry. That's because some areas do not have hydrants. But for a suburban fire department, our numbers are very low, which equates to great savings for all of our residents and everybody on this call. Tried to go through that as quickly as I could. Again, keeping with everybody's time. Hopefully you got to see the video, got to hear some music in the background, but we are here to serve. Anything we can do. Again, 100% volunteer, and anything you need from us, please reach out. But we certainly appreciate the support from everyone on the board and the township residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your presentation. I actually have a question. I'm sure some of the other board members may have questions too.
Sure.
So let's open it up for questions from the board. Does any of the board have a question for the Chief?
This is Hugh. I'd like to expound a little bit. The borough owns the apparatus, and each fire company is owned by each fire company themselves. When you see the letter drive come around for the fire company, that's supporting the fire company and the volunteers themselves, as opposed to the borough itself. Steve, good job on the presentation.
Thanks, Hugh.
Questions for Steve?
Yeah, I got 3 questions, Sean, if I may. Steve, on your diagram, your pie chart here, you're showing 44% of your calls going out on false alarms. What are you doing, or what is your policy regarding false alarms, and what do you do to those folks that you go out to on multiple false alarms? What policy do you pursue as far as that goes?
That's a really great question, John. Thank you for asking. So we have a few of our areas that do have an alarm ordinance. In the borough, we've been very fortunate where the property owner does receive a notice, and then of course a subsequent violation fine after that. But we do have some problem areas. For example, one in particular, Cambridge Hall on Rosedale, 34 times, I said 34 times in 2020 we've been there. I've personally visited the establishment multiple times. It's extremely taxing on our people, our equipment, and from my seat, the bigger concern for me is when it actually is something. It's kind of the boy who cried wolf principle. It's really tough for me to get individuals to come out for the 32nd, 33rd time in a year at 2 o'clock in the morning for somebody who fell asleep after a night of partying to go to an alarm when it's actually something a little more. So that's the real disturbing thing for me. That's one of those things you lose sleep at night. But we've gone as far about 6 years ago with Cambridge Hall, where I took a hard stance, and we weren't going to go this far, of course, but we said, we're just not going to come anymore, which is obviously a public safety hazard or a concern, a high risk. But to let them know how serious we are about that. I know Mike was on from the edge. We were there 5 times in the last year. Again, 27 square miles. Cambridge Hall is our worst offender. I know it's one single, I guess, address, you could say, for the most part, multiple buildings. But we do have some offenders. And to answer your question, John, we try our best. We try to reach out where there's not an ordinance to the property owners, to the managers. We work, Andrea, Fire Marshal Test has been she's a great asset to us and helps out. But sometimes, there's only so far, at least we can go on that establishment. Chief Carroll and his staff, they're always out there. We get to see them out at Cambridge Hall. We'd rather go hang out with them somewhere else rather than 2 o'clock in the morning for somebody overcooking something that shouldn't be in their oven. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, John. But, we have some strong feelings when it comes to the multiple alarms. They're there for a reason. And we've had countless times where it's legitimate. It's saved people's houses. It's saved lives, no doubt about it. But there's also quite a few offenders that take advantage of us in the system.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, Steve, what can we do, or what can municipalities do to help you mitigate these false alarms?
I promote ordinances, at least on the alarm ordinances, just because I think it opens people's eyes and it creates that level of accountability for them to, do a little more than say, oh, we'll try not to call you again next time. So I saw that's on your agenda, so how fitting, but I didn't know that was coming, but that's great that it's at least a discussion point. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Other questions from the board?
No, Steve, thank you so much for your presentation. I always love learning about our different fire companies. And actually, Martin Helmke was my professor in college, so
Oh, great.
I know him very well, and he was always always would share stories from the fire company. So that's great. You guys do a good job. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
I actually have a follow-up question for you, Steve, relative to the idea of a false alarm fee. Do you have an opinion as to whether the fee should not be too punitive, so that it doesn't create a behavior where alarms might be disabled where if someone knows they don't want to fix something or there's a problem and they feel that they don't want to pay fines, so better to find a way to avoid the fees. Are you worried about that with fees, or do you think it's not a concern?
That's always a risk, sure. And we do see it, and unfortunately, we don't see it until it's too late. So we do see that in the borough a lot. You know, usually our stance, you know, we're the eyes and ears of the codes department. So we go out there and we see some of these things, and we turn it over to the codes department right away. But you know, of course, you know what you're saying is absolutely always a risk and a concern, obviously, that somebody would tamper with or forgo, you know, a detector just for that reason. You know, we've seen covers, we've seen them pulled off, you name it. We've seen just about everything done to alarm systems.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steve from the board?
Well, let me just ask Steve, how's your funding for this year considering COVID? How has that adversely affected your ability to maintain operations?
It certainly has affected it. Luckily, we've had the opportunity to apply for a few different grants, both through the county and through the state, that have helped with that. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we still have to do fundraising, which, you know, it's hard enough to get volunteers to staff the trucks and respond to calls, but then we have individuals that we have to do fundraising activities. You know, for example, a group put together the designer bag bingo. That was a great fundraiser for us, but unfortunately couldn't do that with COVID. There's quite a few other events like that we've had to forgo, but luckily through the grants through the state and the county, they've helped to offset those costs.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, or is there any member of the public with a question for the chief? Very good. Well, thank you, Steve, we appreciate your time tonight and walking us through your slides. Very informative, and thank you for your comments.
Of course.
All right, so moving on our agenda, we're up to item number 6, discussion of a false alarm fee for township commercial, institutional, and residential fire alarms. Casey?
Yeah, Andrea Testa, our fire marshal, was in a discussion with Goshen Fire, who wholeheartedly supports a false alarm fee for fire calls. It would mimic our police alarm fee. And as you heard from Chief Pelna, they have a problem as well with in Westchester Fire's jurisdiction as well. So this is just for discussion. If the board wants to take some more time to think about it over coming weeks, months, feel free. But it would essentially make we are one of the few around here that does not have a false alarm fee. Tredyffrin, East Goshen, and the borough all have false alarm fees for their fire company, where the municipality shares 70% of the expense with them, and the townships keep about 30% for administrative costs. It's got support of all the fire companies, and again, it mimics our police false alarm fee, if you want me to go over that.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, Casey, what is the fees, or Chief Carroll, what is the fee structure look like?
Sure, straight out of our fee schedule, you get one false alarm per calendar year, and obviously the fire company determines if it was a false alarm. It's nothing to do with us. The second and third false alarms are $50 per. The fourth through the seventh false alarms per calendar year are $100, and then the eighth and subsequent false alarms per calendar year are $200 each. And as you heard Chief Pelna with Cambridge Hall, they would have faced fines of about $5,000 last year, and that's a pretty big incentive to fix their problems and modify tenant behavior, to say the least.
Casey,
yep.
This is Hugh. Can we raise that eighth and above to $300? Is that legal?
That is the board's discretion. East Goshen's fee is, Kristen sent it to us late, but I believe after 5 or 6, it goes to $500 per.
Yeah,
Because-
for the seventh false alarm and each
Right.
false alarm thereafter and any rolling 12 months, it's $500.
Right. So, I mean, Chief Pelna, you don't have to answer this, but what does it cost to get an engine out of the barn and try to round up volunteers to go fight essentially a false alarm at 2 o'clock in the morning? I mean, that is a massive expense, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Not to mention fuel and wear and tear on the vehicles.
Right. So
'Cause
to answer your question, Hugh, you can do anything you want with fees.
Yeah, okay. I'd vote for the 500. Having done it.
Yeah, that would be a question I would have. Are these fees that we're considering sufficient to change behavior? Steve, in your experience with those municipalities that have false alarm fees, do you find that people finally get the message after a while that they fix their fire alarm systems? Or do they do like Sean suggested, where they just shut them off?
No, absolutely. And I'll tell you from at least being in my seat, I'm the lucky one that gets the phone call of the owner or the property owner begging for forgiveness or one more or, lowering. So, and usually my stance is pretty the same no matter what on that one. There has to be an extenuating circumstance for that to hold true.
So basically, you're saying then that the fees are working. They get people to respond to you because they get a bill for a false alarm. So they're doing something about it. They're at least responding to you. Okay.
Yeah.
I think these fees we're talking about, maybe you're not aware of it, but do you think they're sufficient to get people to change their errant behavior? Or should we be looking for a higher charge?
I want to kind of abstain from that if I could on the dollar figure because I think I'm not too in tune with where that money goes. I would assume it goes into your general fund. But we're grateful of the contribution to our 5-year contract. So hopefully those monies could go to offset those costs for your contribution to our 5-year contract.
Okay, just 2 quick questions then. What happens if the fee's not paid, and is there a lien placed on the property at some point? And my question then finally is, why haven't we done this already?
John, we've asked before, not recently, but probably 5 years ago, and it was rejected at that time.
Okay, and reason why? I'm just curious.
They just didn't want to see another fee. That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
Right. Well,
I'd like to comment.
Okay.
I'd like to comment, John. That was first of all before my time. I'd like to see the 4 to 7 run go to 250 and 8 and above go to 500.
Okay.
I just got a question actually back to Chief Pelner on this. So the 30-odd calls you got at Cambridge, it sounds like most of them weren't actually false alarms, as in a triggering event that was not related to, it was related to a malfunction of something or whatever else. Sounds like they were to do with behaviors, late at night, ovens, pizzas on fire, whatever else. So do you register those as a false alarm, or are they actually a response that's a problem, but is potentially a source of a fire?
Yeah, so just one thing to clarify, when our pagers go off or however we're notified, we're going to respond the same way we would as if somebody, said there was fire on their second floor blowing out the windows and people were trapped. We're gonna respond the same way each and every time, which is obviously, back to Casey's point about the cost. The indirect costs are the potential that risk going down the road each and every time that we're putting not only ourselves in, but other motorists. To kind of further on the question, we've detection systems have to change. So they used to have Cambridge as an example, not to beat on them, but there are under. So they their detectors originally were in the kitchen spaces. So we were getting quite a few alarms. Then they moved them out to just the common hallways, and then there would just be local alarms within the actual apartment themselves. And then they switched back to monitored in the living space. So really what they need to do is more of a rate to rise. So the smoke detectors, you know, they're very sensitive, everything from incense, which we quite often have to deal with, or, smoking. We get a lot of those as well. They're sensitive to that, but detectors like the rate to rise are more of a heat detector. So it'll take the differentials in temperatures as thermal layers and over a course of a time. They're obviously going to be more expensive. There's more science behind it, so it equates to an expense with that. But the false alarms, they're false just in the fact that they weren't going anywhere, but whether they were a culinary mishap or some type of thing like smoking, incense, candles, what have you, along those lines.
So if I could, I just have a couple of things to share, a couple of points, a couple of concerns, and play devil's advocate a little bit here. I certainly understand that there's a cost associated with dispatching fire personnel and the engines to a false alarm. Sean, you brought up earlier in the conversation, could this lead to people disabling their alarms? Maybe it could. Is that wise? Probably not. It's a risk that we would be taking with this. My second point is the taxpayers of West Goshen and a lot of the public donate funds to these fire companies because they're a service that the public values tremendously, and that we know will show up if we are in trouble. People have alarms that are faulty. If I had my alarm go off, which it has in the past once in the spring, and then it happens again once in the fall, I'm going to be paying $50 for that. It seems like it's a little much for 2 alarms going off. And my third point is that if somebody has a heart attack and they call an ambulance and the ambulance is dispatched and all the EMTs are dispatched and they get there and the person says, sorry, it was a false alarm, is that something that now we should be charging people for? I understand that the circumstances are different. At the same time, I do want to take into consideration the fact that there are repeat offenders that maybe should be held to a different standard than the general public, who might just be unlucky with an alarm and now are looking at $100, $200 fee. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Ashley. So asking the board right now, is there any board member willing to make a motion here relative to institution of false fire alarm fees?
I'll make a motion to have
What's
the
your
fees
specific
imposed.
motion?
That's what I'm about to say, that we had the first alarm be a warning, the second and third alarms be $50, the fourth through the seventh be $250, and the eighth and above be $500 per false alarm.
Thanks, Hugh. Is there a second for Hugh's motion?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Is there any other board comment on this? I have a question. If Andrea's there, I don't know if she's here or not. I don't think she is, right, Casey? But no. What's her perspective on the fees? Can you share her actual thinking on this versus other than she just supports it?
No, she's been beyond supportive of this since we first brought it up 5 or 6 years ago. She is completely in the position of this incentivizes people with broken alarms to get them fixed. It's all about compliance with her. There is the small specter of someone disabling their alarm, but that is putting themselves in danger or their tenants. And since we do rental inspections now, Bill's in those apartments constantly, and we do commercial inspections as well. So she is more than supportive of this and even volunteered to act as our collection agent for the West Goshen fees.
How many bills would we end up potentially sending out if you looked at 2020? I know you sent some data, Casey, but I did not have a chance to look at it.
Yeah, she gathered Goshen just on the fly, and sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but she'd probably send 60 or 70 a year. So it's not a great, a huge time sink for her.
Okay, thanks.
And just one more thing, we'd have to establish this by ordinance anyway. We can't adopt this tonight. Kristen, is that correct?
I mean, you have it as part of your fee resolution, but I think to the extent you're going to be taking, if people don't pay, you're going to take enforcement action. I think it's better to have it by ordinance.
Okay.
And I know that, Sean, you had asked a question about what if people don't pay. The way we handled East Goshen's, and I wrote that a couple years ago, we kept in both civil and summary citation enforcement. So we actually can file, and I'm going to file one tomorrow actually for a company that had 5 different false alarms and just keeps ignoring the bills. A lot of times it's corporate companies that are not local that the general manager sends the bills to. So a lot of times it's just trying to find the right person to pay the bill. But you can file those through a civil court, district court action, or through summary criminal. So we can have both of those in the ordinance.
Thanks, Chris. It was actually John who'd asked that question, but no problem.
Okay.
Sean, if I could real quick. Just on Ashley's point, as far as the, false alarms, exactly which ones those are. We have a coding system on all of ours, and I'm pretty sure Goshen does the exact same one. We use emergency reporting. So we have a slew of numbers dependent upon exactly why the alarm went off. So we have different categories where it's billable versus unbillable. And the billable are truly the malicious alarms where, we find a reason, and I have to be able to defend that. So, if it's I just have a troublesome alarm, I got a new ADT system and, I just can't get it figured out. I've been calling, that's something we're going to work with. But if it's truly malicious where we're going out and they're burning incense, at 2 o'clock in the morning to, so other tenants in the building don't have to smell their smoke or whatever. That's where it boils down to. If that helps.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any other board questions? Are there any public questions for this motion?
Sean, this is Doug. Public comment, please.
Go ahead, Doug.
Maybe a good idea would be to include a set of definitions in the ordinance as to exactly what is a false alarm and what is just an honest mistake. Sometimes you can have an emergency, call the police, and then handle it, or the fire department handle it yourself. They get there and, oh, it's handled. And is that a false alarm? So, just a set of definitions as far as when you would charge and when you wouldn't. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Are there any other public comments?
I just want to make one question for you. I think it's probably for our staff, Casey. Just reading through the second half of Andrea's statements, she says she's going to be taking on the billing responsibility, but is there other responsibility associated with trying to document the people who continue to not recognize the responsibility to make sure that they don't have false alarms? I hear what Doug is talking about. I myself have already been a terrible situation multiple times because I'm a terrible cook, and I've had to have 2 or 3 fire engines come up my driveway just because I burned dinner. So I do want to have some absolution for those type of people, but I also think it's important for us to know how we're going to address these individuals if we're going to take responsibility for that billing. Meaning, do we want to make sure that we're recognizing how many false alarms they keep having.
Well, that's all part of the record keeping.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would just be a filing issue.
Yeah.
You would keep folders, and individual property addresses would have a folder, and what their history is as far as false alarms would be in that specific folder. So I would agree with Casey. It's more of a clerical thing to keep track of than anything. It's easy to do.
Yeah, and it's a counseling issue too. I mean, the fire company and Andrea as fire marshal, if someone repeatedly burns their chicken, on a Tuesday night, over 4, 5, or 6 weeks, they would have to have a discussion with them that maybe they need to 600 degrees and,
They need to start going out to
Go for
dinner.
takeout, you mean?
Maybe.
Let someone else cook?
Yeah, takeout.
Maybe. Could be. Could be.
Yeah, come on.
I just want to go back to Doug's question, Kristen. Does the East Goshen ordinance actually have any definitions around false alarms, or does it even reference the fact that the fire company uses a methodology to determine it, or is it silent?
I think it has definitions. I was actually going to pull that up while he was talking. I'm pretty certain it does. I have to confirm that.
Okay. Any other public comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. So at this point, we're going to take a roll call vote on moving this through to the next step as an ordinance, right? Was what I heard was the preferred
Correct.
approach, Casey?
Yes, correct.
That was my intent.
Thank you, Hugh.
Can you just repeat what Hugh says for his dollar amounts? Because I think they're different than what we got in our packet.
Yeah, they're slightly elevated. Okay, so he said for the first false alarm per calendar year, it would be a warning. The second and third false alarms per calendar year, it would be $50 per alarm. The 4 through 7 false alarms per calendar year would be $250 each. And the 8th and subsequent false alarm would be $500 each.
Okay, ready for roll call vote? Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Very good, thank you.
Sean, just to quickly jump in, sorry. If anybody wants to go and look at East Goshen's Chapter 81 in their code, which you can get from their website, it does have under 81-2 specific definitions for false alarm, false fire alarm, false police alarm. So yeah, we did think through that and define them, and we can use that as references.
Thank you, Kristen.
If I can make a comment, Sean, and I think Steve will agree with me. Having been an officer who had the responsibility of determining it, for example, in Robin's case where she burned the chicken, and we had to use a smoke ejector, that wasn't, in my opinion, ever considered a false alarm. That was services rendered. So
yeah, that would be a fire.
We didn't call that a false alarm.
But you would have canceled it, though, right, Hugh?
I'm sorry.
You would have canceled.
No, I'm a terrible cook. If it's not on the grill outside, I can't handle it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your time tonight.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on, we're on to agenda item number 7, discussion and request to advertise for bid the Idlewild Stormwater Basin Retrofit Project. Rick.
Yeah, I'm going to make him presenter. He wants to show the plan, so just give us just a second. There you go.
Okay, as we've discussed a couple of times before in my stormwater updates, HRG has been designing a grant project, a grant-funded project through the ME2 grant for retrofitting 2 stormwater basins that currently exist in the Idlewild development. That design's been going on for several months and is now complete. You see on the screen the two basins. The one on the right is going to become, they're both supposed to be dry basins now. The one on the right is dry and is going to remain that way, but it's going to be modified to extend the detention time, to extend the flow path, to add infiltration into the basin, and to naturalize the bottom of the basin, to improve filtration, to improve infiltration, and reduce maintenance. The basin on the left was supposed to be a dry basin, but it has turned into a wet basin over time because the results of our soil testing show that the soil does not infiltrate. It's very clay material. So instead of trying to make that do something it doesn't want to do, HRG designed that as a wet basin, which will also be retrofitted to change the flow paths, to increase the flow path, and to put wetland type plants in the bottom of the basin to better take up some of that water and use the water that wants to stay in the basin. So that's a little bit different than our original design intent, but it also worked out fairly well. Wet basins have very effective treatment capacities, especially for nutrient removal, which is beneficial. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing with these two basins. The designs are complete. They do not require approval by DEP as far as NPDES permitting because they're smaller than that threshold. So the next step is to bid the project for construction, which again is grant funded by the ME2 grant. So we're here tonight requesting approval to advertise the project and to receive bids. We do have a schedule from the consultant. So we're now asking for approval to advertise. We're going to advertise twice in February. We'll receive bids at the beginning of March and then come back to you with a recommendation to award the bids in March and begin construction in April. And we should be completed by October 1st. So that's the proposed schedule, the proposed design. And we would ask for your approval to start that advertising process. And if you have any questions, I would be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you, Rick. Any
John,
questions for Rick from the
is it
board?
in order?
Sorry,
Yeah, if it's in order, I'll make the motion to approve advertising.
Okay, Hugh has made the motion.
And to proceed with the project.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. So Hugh has made a motion to advertise for bids and to move forward with the project. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Yeah, I'll motion.
John was the second. Thank you. Are there any board comments or questions for Rick or staff? Are there any public comments?
Hi, it's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
Why can't staff handle this job? Why does it need to be bid out?
It's a legal requirement to bid any construction project.
We're just moving dirt, right? Planting some wetland grass.
Rick, she's asking why our Public Works Department isn't doing the actual construction. That's the question.
Well, for two reasons. Number one, we don't have the capacity to do this work. And number two, this is a fairly specialized type of work, and I don't know that we have the folks in-house that can do that type of work.
Are there any? Thank you, Margie. Are there any other public comments?
Actually, I just want to continue on here a little bit. Do we know for sure that it is legal to spend public funds on private property?
I would have to leave that question up to Kristen.
I would just like to point out that there's a stream running along New Street that goes through the Links property, and we have a lot of stream bank erosion. So maybe we could look to have that on one of the next township stormwater projects. I mean, would the township be willing to do stream restoration on the Links property?
I can't answer that right now. These projects are chosen to fit into our MS4, TMDL, PRP project areas so that we can receive benefit from our MS4 program. Basin retrofits are a much easier project, both to design, construct, and maintain. Stream bank restorations are very difficult, particularly with the permitting. We may do some stream bank restoration projects later in the TMDL cycle, but we're not doing them right now. So this is the preferred scope of project that we're working on at this point in time.
All right. It just seems that perusing the DEP website, that they have a specific definition of stormwater or public stormwater systems, and it precisely says that it's on public property.
Well, if we have to do TMDL projects on public property, we will fail miserably, because out of the 215 basins in the township, we own 4. And one of those 4 projects has already proven not to be viable. So the only way to do effective MS4 projects in accordance with DEP requirements is to do them on private property. And that's pretty much what everybody's going to be doing. So that's what we're doing as well.
All right. One last comment and then I'm finished. I pulled up the plans for the stormwater, for this particular stormwater basin. And it doesn't appear as it was ever built to the engineered plans to begin with. So I'm just not pleased that proper sign-offs on the original project 20 years ago, that it wasn't built to the plan back then. So,
and what are you referring to that wasn't built to plan?
It looked like there was a 12-foot what do you call it, free board.
No, there's no way there was 12 feet of freeboard. That's not correct.
All right.
What appears to not have been totally properly constructed or possibly settled over time is the emergency overflow for the left-hand basin. That needs to be reestablished because it's not well established now. I have no way of knowing whether that was constructed properly at the time because that predates my time here. But whether it's settled or whether it wasn't built properly in the first place, it needs to be corrected at this point, and that will be part of the project. But we have no indication that the basins were not substantially completed as designed. The problem is the designs from 30 years ago don't do the same things that the retrofit designs today do by quite a bit.
All right, and then who maintains them after these? We spend $200,000 on these things.
The HOA will continue to own and maintain the basins in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second, so it's time for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much. We will proceed with advertising.
Next on our agenda is item number 8, discussion and possible approval of resolution 5-2021, Finance Department document destruction. Casey?
Yep, this is just a typical housekeeping item for the finance department. We have per the Pennsylvania Museum Historic Commission records retention schedule. We follow that to the letter. The finance department has put forth the following list of documents to be destroyed, including utility billing posting stubs from 2018. Most of the documents are from 2013, including UB posting proof reports, miscellaneous deposits, police reports, posting deposits, etc. And again, we follow the PHMC's records retention schedule to the letter. So this is housekeeping.
I'm going to make the motion that we proceed with the destruction of the aforementioned documents.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Robin. Is there any board questions or comments on the destruction of these documents? Is there any public comment on the destruction of these finance documents?
Sean, this is Doug. On the police reports, do they keep digital copies of those?
Well, these are police reports that do not have anything to do with the police department directly. These are copies that we receive. So it's the police department maintains their own copies.
Okay.
So what, Casey, just on that, what is in the finance department that's related to a police report then?
It could be false alarm fees, most likely. I didn't review that specifically, but it's typically we get a copy of the police report when we do we get a deposit for a false alarm fee. So we know where to allocate the funds.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other public comments or questions?
Yeah, if I could just ask a quick question. Casey, some of these receipts, the posting stubs are not even 3 years old. Is there any minimum length of time that any financial records have to be retained? I know for my IRS stuff, I have to hold on to it for at least 3 years, right? And that's the rule. You got to hold on to stuff for 3 years. Is there any rule that we have to meet as far as our documentations when it comes to financial records?
Yeah, as I said, we follow the Pennsylvania Museum Historic Commission record retention policy to the letter. So those 3+ year old utility billing receipts posting stubs are within that range to get rid of. We don't deviate from their requirements at all.
Yeah, well, there's some here that go to October 26th of 2018. So that would be, I'm just wondering if there's a minimum amount of time you have to hold on to these things. All right.
John, again, we follow the PHMC to the letter. We don't destroy anything beforehand.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other public comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, moving to a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Thank you. And now we're on to agenda item number 9, discussion and possible approval of resolution 6-2021 establishing no parking for Willowbrook Lane. Casey and Bill.
I'll make the motion. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Casey. Let's have a little discussion on this first.
Certainly. Bill, please throw in too. We had a zoning hearing board case, the Luxor, just not even 2 weeks ago, in which the applicant, which owns the Luxor, cautioned the township. Bill and I attended the hearing virtually, that they expected residents to park on Willowbrook because it was accessible. It's a street right next to the Luxor. So we're taking the opportunity before Luxor is even completed to prohibit parking on both sides of the street up and down Willowbrook from South Matlack down to the cul-de-sac, because we fully expect overflow residents and guests to park on the street. The street is not wide enough for any parking at all. We even get complaints from the Redgo development company, which owns most of the buildings on Willowbrook. When FedEx will, if they have a parking problem, FedEx will park trucks on the street. we get an instant call from Fred Gobert at Redgo to ask us to move the trucks because it's inhibiting egress to his cul-de-sac. It's all commercial traffic. There are no residences on the street. So it was actually suggested, as I said, from the applicant. Bill, do you have anything else to add?
No, the applicant did suggest this. He does fear that this will become a problem, and which will become our problem because Fred Gobert from Redgo will be calling us nonstop.
Absolutely.
John, if I could add something.
Go ahead, Rick.
I would wholeheartedly agree with posting Willowbrook for all of the reasons mentioned. I'd also like to point out that we have a similar problem across the street at Haggerty Boulevard with commercial vehicles and private vehicles being parked along the road and in the cul-de-sac. So I would also request that possibly the board consider posting Haggerty Boulevard as well as Willowbrook.
Okay, good.
That's a good call because we have had several complaints from people in Haggerty with regards to people parking in the cul-de-sac.
Yep.
Would that need to be a separate ordinance?
No, that can be part of tonight's resolution. We will have to gather all of these resolutions for no parking speed limits to do an ordinance update at a later date. So you can add that. The board, if they so deem tonight, can add no parking on Haggerty. And also one other secondary issue, but it could be a primary issue given what's coming Thursday. On-street parking is difficult during a snowstorm. We can't plow correctly. And even if we order cars off the street, we have to tow them. And people parking in cul-de-sacs, it's especially a problem because our trucks can't get in and clear correctly. So that's an added incentive to do no parking.
I have a couple of questions, actually. So why are the Luxor saying they're going to have overflow parking issues when, isn't the parking adequate for what we've built there? Why do they think it's going to be end up on the street?
If someone has a party, I mean, there's not that much excess there's not that much excess parking. If multiple tenants have larger parties, there won't be enough parking.
I think they're anticipating possibly there's enough spaces, Sean, and there's spaces there on the property, but people just being too lazy visiting friends or something like that as well. So it might not be an issue of adequate parking, but just people being lazy and parking on the street as well.
Yeah, I mean, they may have to grab a parking pass for their guests from the management to park on the property. So they'll look for any off-street parking that they can get.
Yeah, Sean, that was John Herzog from Luxor's concern. We had a private conversation about this prior to the zoning hearing, and he did have a concern with visitors just deciding they were just going to park on Haggerty because there is a limited amount of visitor parking.
Yep.
And who's parking on Haggerty now? What's on that street that people feel they need to park on the street versus on the on off-street parking?
I'm sorry, I meant Willowbrook for Luxor, but the people that are parking on Haggerty are people that are in office buildings who there's just the one owner took his area and put up a fence. It's his, which took parking away, and now people park on the cul-de-sac.
Are they visitors to these office buildings, or are they people who are working in them? Employees. So that's the situation where there isn't enough parking at a particular office location then?
Correct, which is another reason anytime an application comes in for a UNO, I do a parking study to make sure that to make sure that they have enough parking to fit the use.
And do you know, is there a particular offending office building then that's causing the issue?
There is, and there's nothing that we can do, or we would have already done it, because he owns the property. This part of because it's condoed off, and he owns that area, so he put up a fence, and basically, so his trucks can park there, which eliminated parking. And that reduced the amount of parking in that space.
So what's the unintended consequence of putting no parking on Haggerty? Where are they going to go?
I think at that point, the businessman association there is going to have to work it out with that other owner.
Mhm.
I mean, this is the only way we can resolve the situation.
But in the near term, while they're resolving it, where are those folks going to park?
There are parking places there now that can be used immediately. They're just fenced off.
Guys, can I jump in on that for one thing for the Haggerty? We should take a look at that because they may be in violation of their land development plans as far as doing a condo plan after the fact, where all of the parking was supposed to be available to all of the uses and the full building. So I'd like to have a conversation maybe with Rick and Bill offline about Haggerty Boulevard separately.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kristen. I think that is part of the problem, but that's not the whole problem. And we have a pretty good amount of commercial vehicles parking on there too. So it would certainly be good to address the problem at 20 Haggerty in multiple ways, but I think it would still be very beneficial, particularly to the Public Works Department with snow removal, to post that area no parking.
I would just give my 2 cents though, because I was thinking the same thing Sean was thinking, is that you can sign it all you want, but the reality is where are people going to park? So maybe there has to be advance notice to the owners in that area of what's in store and what's intended, so that they can work through a resolution themselves.
Kristen, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but one of the problems was that over time, before me, the previous zoning officers would just sign off on things. So uses would change, a use would come in, and the original intended purpose of that building was a warehouse. So warehouse is 1 space per 1,000 square feet. Well, now Joe businessman has taken half of his warehouse space and converted it to office space. Well, now that's 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So that's where the imbalances happened. Previous zoning officers didn't follow our ordinance when they signed off on UNOs, which created a problem.
Okay.
Question for Rick and Bill. Would signing off the Haggerty cul-de-sac right now solve some of the problem without doing all of Haggerty?
It would solve a significant part of the problem, but it would not address the commercial vehicle parking.
Yeah, quite honestly, I've had telephone calls where there's a business in Westtown that has a large car hauler come and park, and it sits there for a few hours because he gets cars delivered or having cars taken away. And that guy usually parks right across from the church.
I mean, it kind of shouldn't be our problem where they park, because that's the owner's problem. I feel like it's always been the owner's responsibility to figure out where your people are going to park. And they can't just, like, I don't want it to be a tail wagging the dog kind of situation.
My only concern, actually, and the reason I raised it, is that you don't want them parking on another public street. And Matlack would, I don't know if that's the closest street they'd go to, but you definitely don't want them parking there.
Yeah, I'd like to take these two separately. I'd like us to address Willowbrook first and then decide whether we need more time, more information, a little more effort around what options there are to resolve Haggerty. Just my view. What do the other board members think?
I agree.
Yeah, I'll go along with that.
Okay. Well then, do I have a motion to? Go ahead, Hugh.
I'll make the motion that we adopt Resolution 6-2021 for no parking on Willowbrook Lane.
Thanks, Hugh. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other board questions or comments, or any public comment?
Just a quick question. I did have some prior discussion and email exchange with Casey and Bill. I'm just curious, just for my own learning curve, I guess. We went through back in September and October a no parking along Warren Road, but we had to do an ordinance for that to be accomplished. Whereas here we're doing this by resolution. I don't quite understand why in one situation we had to do an ordinance change, and here we're able to do a resolution to make something be enforceable when it comes to road signage. Can I just get some clarification on that?
Sure, John, we used to approve all of these by resolution and then do a cleanup ordinance at the end of the year for any speed changes or any stop sign changes. I don't suggest we do an ordinance every single time you want to put in no parking.
Nor am I.
Yeah, I mean, it's $700 to advertise it per time. So,
I appreciate that. I just wonder why we had to follow that route, spending $700 for Warren Road, but here we don't have to. I'm just trying to understand the different situations.
Yeah, Warren Road, we hadn't had any previous speed limit changes or no parking changes for quite a long time before that. So we went right to the ordinance with that one.
Well, there's no parking. There was no parking along Warren Road prior to that in different sections, but I'm just trying to understand when you would apply the resolution venue to solve this problem as opposed to doing an ordinance to solve this problem. And
John, I can jump in. I think it's preferable, obviously, to do the ordinance. I think the timing of the Warren Road one was coming towards the end of the year. And as Casey mentioned, what we would do is, if it's sort of in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, you do it, you accumulate, you do it by resolution, you get the signage up, and usually in November and December, Casey would send off all the resolutions that were adopted in the year for me to put into one master ordinance. All of these parking restrictions come under one chapter of the West Goshen Code, and we would do one comprehensive ordinance, say in November and December, to formally ordain it. And I think from the Warren Road, it might have just been a timing of when that occurred. I did say in an email this evening when I saw your exchange, this ordinance is easy enough to put in. We can put it into, there's some saldo amendments that we're working on and have gone to your planning commission. So we can always tack this one on and avoid the additional advertising costs if need be.
All right, no problem. I just want to understand going forward how best to address these situations. All right, thank you.
Are there any other public comments on this motion to pass Resolution 6/2021?
Sean, this is Doug. Public comment, please. Have there been any other comments from other businesses along Willowbrook Lane, such as the hotel or Penn Medicine?
The only comments are negative comments from everyone that they don't like on-street parking there. So there is, you won't get a peep out of anyone, especially Fred Gobert, who owns the entire block except for the hotel and the FedEx.
Okay, so basically everyone's in favor of it. Okay.
Are there any other public comments?
Hi, I have a quick comment. Is it fair to say a resolution, you could not really enforce no parking? You could put a sign there, but you couldn't write a no parking ticket, or you couldn't tow a vehicle if it's not an ordinance? Is that fair?
I actually looked, Margie, in the motor vehicle code because I know that the borough of Westchester has a provision in its home rule charter that allows you to do a signage ordinance such as this for a 90-day period by resolution and then requires an ordinance. And I wasn't able to find it in enough time, but I think as long as we have the intention to go forward with the ordinance, by the time we get the signs up, I think we'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Time for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
John is aye. Thank you, everyone. And Kristen, you'll work with staff a little bit around Haggerty Boulevard, some of your ideas or suggestions there, right?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Moving along on the agenda, we're now at item number 10. reports for the month of January 21. First is the police report presented by Chief Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. The report from the police department for January 2021, our officers responded to 1,937 calls for service. Of those, 50 were alarms, 2 being valid. We responded to 15 reportable accidents and 24 non-reportable accidents and drove a total of 15,843 miles. We conducted selective traffic enforcement on 9 different roadways in the township: Pottstown Pike, Goshen Road, Chrislina Lane, South Beaumar Street, South New Street, and Route 202, Taylor's Mill Road, South High Street, and the Route 100 spur. Our training was limited in January to in-house training with Lexipol's daily training bulletins and the PA virtual training network. There is a good point to bring up that on March 1st, Captain Greg Stone will be leaving us. He's retiring after about 35 years of service to the township, and it's our tradition to walk him out. So when he arrives at 7 o'clock in the morning on March 1st, the department will be lined up to give him his due respect on his last day. And we certainly invite any member of the public that wants to come out and see that to stop by. And lastly, we received notice from Lexipol, that's our policy company, this year that they are recognizing us with a gold award for our performance on issued policies and daily training bulletins. So we received their highest award. It was unexpected, but we're happy to get it. That's the report from the police department.
Very good. Well done. Congratulations to your team there on their training, and use of Lexipol is definitely a very positive thing. And Captain Stone is March the 1st. I just want to make sure we got the date right.
March the 1st.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions for the Chief from the board?
Well, Ashley and I had a monthly meeting with Chief Carroll. Ashley, do you want to let folks know what we talked about?
Sure, yeah. I think our monthly meetings have been going pretty well. I like that we're doing it. We talked about our couple of new officers that we just took on. We spoke about our plans, our hopeful plans to establish some sort of citizens advisory board or committee to work in conjunction with the police department. And so I think, you know, plans for that are underway, and we'll kind of see if we can get that up and running at some point this year. And yeah, the chief kind of just filled us in, especially on this award. I think it's great. And we're looking forward to celebrating Captain Stone. Is there anything else, Sean?
Well, we also talked about the job expectations that we developed, you know, along with the board input. And Chief Carroll had some thoughts about that. So we're going to incorporate that into the expectations and then share that with all the board members and with staff and also with our solicitor. So we're in the process of getting that together. And then following from that, we're developing an evaluation instrument, which we'd be able to use on an annual evaluation with the chief. So, yeah, all those things are moving forward. So more to come.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any public comments or questions for the chief? All right. Well, thank you, Chief Carroll, for your succinct report. We appreciate that. Moving on, we're on to Board of Supervisors announcements, agenda item number 11. Ashley, do you want to start?
Can someone else start so I can just get my stuff together
Sure.
here?
John, would you like to go first?
I'm gonna start.
Robin, you go first.
I'm going first because I want to tell you how outstanding the minutes are utilizing the, what's it called, Casey? We're talking about the minutes and how they digest the information, and we have these amazing minutes that are basically almost verbatim.
Well, it's a transcript from GoToMeeting, so if that's what you mean, yes.
Yeah. Derek, weren't you part of this process?
Yeah, the transcription definitely helps. It's still a little bit of a manual process because there's a lot of typos and things that you need to capture that go beyond the transcription, but it's certainly helpful. And I'm going to need to figure out after COVID's over how to kind of capture that. But yeah, right now it's been helpful.
Well, I have to say, I read through all of them and I was so basically intrigued by all the things that we all spoke about during those meetings. So this is a wonderful tool, especially for those who like to be able to review them in more detail than how we've done in the past. So thank you, Derek, for what you did. Okay, move on. I don't have anything else to announce.
No, I was just going to compliment Derek also on that. It's like, if, you know, that could be your second job, being a court stenographer. I mean, that was pretty detailed recording in the minutes. It's pretty amazing. It's like reading War and Peace. It's like, oh, there's another page to this. My goodness gracious. But anyway, good job. Thank you, Derek.
It was like writing War and Peace.
Oh, come on, not that bad. Just a quick announcement. I attended on February 11th a webinar. It was called Strategic Planning for Fire Service Operations. It's pretty interesting. It was a 3-hour webinar presented by Jerry Izog, who's the Executive Director of the PA, Pennsylvania Fire and Emergency Service Institute, and he partnered with PSAS, the Pennsylvania Society of Association of Township Supervisors. And it went into to some detail about the value of and the need for 5 to 10 year strategic plans being developed by fire companies. And he had a perspective from looking at from a statewide perspective, so he was able to throw in a lot of experiences that he had. But I did pass that on to our board members, I believe. It's worthwhile tuning in on that. It's a little long, it's 3 hours, but it's well worth the time to investigate what's involved with that. So I would suggest to other board members take advantage of that. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, John. Hugh?
Nothing.
Thank you, Hugh. Ashley, you ready?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to update everybody on the Sustainability Advisory Committee very briefly. So we met last month, and one of the initiatives is going to be obviously Tree City USA, but for the Arbor Day celebration, it was discussed among committee members that they would like to hold the Arbor Day celebration at the site of a historic tree that's in West Goshen Township. It's a 300-year-old weeping beech tree. It's on a private property, so the committee is going to try and work with the property owners to see if we can have it there. But if so, it's probably going to be somewhere, probably on Arbor Day itself. I think it's the end of April. But yeah, things are going well with sustainability, and I think that's all I have tonight.
Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Excuse me. Can I ask Ashley a question? Reference the Weeping Beech. It was my understanding that that new owner of that property, that's the old Gagliardi property, that they were going to donate that to us as a park. Do you have any information on that?
I don't. Casey, do you?
Yeah, we have been in discussion with them since they purchased it about a year ago. They've dropped off the radar. I think we need to reintroduce it, but at first they were interested in subdividing the property, but I'm not sure they have enough open green space and some other site restrictions for the property.
The last I recall, there was some issues with them not wanting to lose that piece of land,
right,
because it would some non-conforming issues or something along those lines. But
right.
I don't remember the specifics. But Casey's right; they sort of dropped off.
Yeah, they were never against us having access to it, but they were running into subdivision issues with that. So
they wanted to grant us an easement.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So my comments, I have two announcements tonight. One, the board met in executive session earlier this evening to discuss personnel matters. And my second announcement is that the Sewer Authority recently performed a review and update to its 10-year capital improvement plan. And having kicked the tires on it and tested what is believed is required in terms of investments, the next step is for the treasurer of the Sewer Authority to work with finance staff at the township, review our modeling around the funding of the capital improvements. And then once that's been jointly come to some conclusions or recommendations, we would then have a session with the sewer authority and the Board of Supervisors to understand the conclusions and recommendations from that. So probably 2 or 3 months away, but that's coming, and the goal is to make sure it's discussed in a joint session ahead of any budget planning process. And that's it for my announcements. So next on the list is Township Managers announcements. Casey.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have 2 announcements. I want to thank Derek for his hard work in getting the new Civic Plus website up and running. It got up and running about 11 o'clock this morning, and it's a big step up from where we were before. So I want to many thanks to Derek and the Civic Plus team. Secondly, we do have an impending snowstorm coming in Thursday morning early. We're still waiting on Republic to tell us if they're going to cancel trash for Thursday. We're looking to have 5 to 8 inches of snow from Thursday morning through Friday morning, plus icing. So it's not going to be a fun 24 hours. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey, and well done, Derek. That I have a little preview of the test site on the website, but I'll be having to check it out tomorrow for real. And congratulations on that.
It was definitely a group effort. We had a lot of people contribute. Even Ashley took a lot of the photos you see on there. So yeah, no, absolutely, it was a group effort, and just glad we got it live. Thanks.
Great. Moving along on the agenda, item number 13, Township Engineers update. Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have anything stormwater related to add to what we've already discussed. The Woodlands construction is progressing for the housing construction. The infrastructure is basically at a standstill due to the inclement weather, and will probably continue to be so until we get some snow melt. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Moving on, agenda item 14, zoning officers announcements. Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The zoning hearing board has had a pretty busy year so far. On February 4th, they heard the application for Goshen Manor Apartments for shed relief, which was approved. They also application number 3 for Goshen Terrace Apartments, which was for shed relief, which was also approved. They heard application 4, which was for the Luxor with the temporary signs and the parking size reduction. The zoning hearing board has decided to defer their decision to March 3rd. On February 10th, they heard application 1, which was 1154 Westchester Pike for a variance for personal services, which that decision was also deferred to March 3rd. So we did receive 3 more applications. The zoning hearing board will be hearing these applications on March 3rd. Application number 5, 800 Virginia Avenue, Building 4, is a variance to allow automobile sales of antique cars and special interest trucks, cars and trucks. The district already allows for the sale of commercial trucks, but it does not allow for automobile sales. And in order for him to get his dealer license from the state, he must have a UNO that says he's allowed automobile sales. So he's requesting a variance. On that application, since we already have similar uses, we allow for the sale of trucks, large commercial trucks in that zoning district. I would recommend that we do not take a position on that, but that is a board decision. So would the board like to take a position on application 5 of 2021?
Board member comments, please.
I don't think so. I'm comfortable with not taking a position.
I agree.
I don't see much difference between having antique cars going and also trucks, special interest trucks. So I have no qualms about it.
Do you want motions on these, Bill, on each one?
I don't
We don't need a motion.
Consensus.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good, Bill. No, board has no position on application number 5.
Very good. So application 6 of 2021 is for 1100 Edward Lane This gentleman, his property is hills and valleys. He has very little flat area. He also has swales running through his property. So he is very limited where he can place a shed on his property. So he's seeking relief from the 6-foot setback requirement in the rear yard. He's found a level area in his rear yard that will basically match up to his neighbor's shed that is already on the property line. So again, considering that he does have a hardship, I would say that we don't take a position on this application either, because he is very limited in where he could place the shed. I have been working with him on that, and we really couldn't come up with the alternative.
Board member questions or comments on this application?
I would agree to take no position.
Yep, sounds good. No position.
Robin or Hugh?
Yep, I said I agree.
Okay. Bill, no position from the board on that one.
Very good. Okay, so application 6, I would suggest that we don't have a lot of conversation on that, because this will come back before the board in a land development situation for approval. So application 7. So application 7 is at 847 Westchester Pike. It's really a de minimis request because it's a lot size. It's relief for a lot size for a 4-unit apartment building. Within that zoning district, we do allow apartment building. The gentleman is going for a 4-unit, which is the zoning district requires, could have 5, but because his net falls below, he's not going for that. But again, the crux of this relief is that the property is 1.19 acres. However, he has to net out the right of ways, which takes him below the 1 acre minimum requirement. And when he nets out the right of ways, it takes him to 0.88 acres. Rick and I have met with the applicant and his partner, and we're satisfied. He's taken our recommendations, and he's not asking for anything more than what he would really be entitled to. So again, I would say we don't take any action on this application either.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions or comments from the board on this application? Hearing none. Bill, I think no position from the board. Thank you.
Very good, but I have nothing further this evening. Thank you.
Agenda item number 15, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of January the 19th, 2021 and February the 2nd, 2021. This is the War and Peace that was referred to earlier.
I'm going to make a motion to
I'll second it.
approve the minutes.
Robin has made a motion. Hugh has seconded it. Any questions from the board members?
So I was going to ask Derek for a little bit of information about how this process works, because I understand you also had to go back to video to collect some of this data.
Yeah, I mean, with the thoroughness that I'm doing it, I rely on the transcript and the video, and I sort of just kind of, so what we're doing tonight, I'll be doing it again at some point over the next, I'll see you all again in this forum at some point next.
Well, you've taken on a big responsibility. I know that this is not what we expected, that you would be doing a transcript and a video to pull it all together. As you probably know, the meeting minutes don't have to be verbatim, but of course, this is a well-documented, very detailed summary of those meeting minutes. So thank you for all the work you've been doing.
So my issue is if I follow Robert's rules, it's very, very bare minimum, but I don't, for minutes, I don't feel like it's in between. It's either bare minimum or I feel like you need to capture every thought, because you lose to, if you try to do an in-between type of thing, I feel like you lose too many thoughts and too many people, and you're losing too much of what you should be capturing as far as the people's intent of what they're saying. So I really think it's either the bare minimum or this, and I chose to go this route, and it seems to be working fine.
My own question, Derek, is whether, how much time you're having to spend re-looking at the video. If you're getting a very accurate transcript from go to meeting, that's one thing. But if you're having to spend 3 hours of reviewing this whole thing over again to make sure it's accurate, that is a question to me as well. That's a good use of your time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that labor intensive, Sean. It's something Casey and I talked about already. We'll have to, I think what I'm doing right now, I'm managing it. We may have to have a conversation down the road on how I can better utilize maybe different technology. I don't know if there's a better way to transcribe it, particularly after COVID's over. So I do think that's going to be an open-ended question as far as the time it's taking to do it. But I think that's probably for another night.
Okay, as long as you have it on your radar, just keep it in mind, because we have a lot of strategic initiatives which we're looking for, township management to really take the lead on. So this is important, but there's also many other important things. So make sure you kind of do that time management thing wisely. All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any public comments on the minutes?
Okay.
Hearing none, we're ready for roll call vote for approval. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 16, which is approval of the Treasurer's report dated January the 31st, 2021. And the bills to be paid from these funds: General Fund, Sewer Revenue Fund, and Waste and Recycling Fund.
I'd like to move for approval of the treasury reports.
And I will second.
Thank you, Hugh and Robin. Are there any board questions or comments on the report? Are there any public comments or questions about the Treasurer's report? Hearing none, ready for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. And the last agenda item tonight is number 17, public comment. Are there any questions or comments from the public this evening?
Sean, this is Doug. Just congratulations to Captain Stone on his well-deserved retirement. Thank you, Captain Stone, for all your service. You're very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. I hope you'll be there on March 1st.
March 1st, 7 o'clock in the morning.
All right. Are there any
I'll
other?
second Doug's comment.
Thank you, Hugh. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Margie.
I took a big carload cardboard to the Township building yesterday, and I noticed that we had a full complement of Public Works employees working on the holiday. How do they get paid when they work a holiday? Is that time and a half, double time and a half?
Ms. Swart, they weren't working a holiday. That's a swing holiday for them. And considering we have a storm coming, most of them worked it just straight time. There's no overtime.
Okay, in the past, I think I asked about, so a swing holiday is different than a floating holiday?
It's just semantics. I'm not sure what your definition would be, so.
A couple months ago, I asked about floating holidays, and you were confident in saying that there were no floating holidays.
Okay, please don't speak for me. We have swing holidays. Typically, Public Works works those Monday holidays, except the major holidays, because they're here Monday through Thursday. If they would have taken the day off, they'd have a 3-day work week. And in the middle of winter, that does not work. So I think all of them worked yesterday. So there is no overtime. It was a normal work day for them.
Okay. And then also, I didn't get a chance to really spend a lot of time on the new website. Mainly, I saw that you have to sign in or sign up for an account. Is there a way to bypass that?
You don't have to sign. It's optional. You don't. the website's fully functional without signing in. That's just an extra option that some people choose to do in order to, as Civic Plus says, customize your experience more, which I don't really know what that means, but maybe somebody could tell us when they sign up for whatever they want to sign up for, but it's not necessary to use the full function of the website.
Okay.
Does that mean that when were you prompted to do that as soon as you land on the web page then? Because that would be a distraction.
Yeah.
Well, it's no, you're not prompted as far as any kind of flash. It's just a little bar up top that kind of, to be honest with you, I guess it's up to the individual.
It's so discreet. It's way up at the top. I didn't get it until just now.
Well,
To
no,
me, it's pretty discreet.
I was just trying to access some of the normal things I usually access, and I can't tell you right off the bat whether it was the monthly reports, but there was something I clicked on and it wanted me to sign in, and I'm like, I have to create an account to see. So,
well, if you could tell
anyway.
me specifics, I'll be happy to take a look at it. But you shouldn't have to sign in to access anything on the website.
Okay, that would be great if that's the case, and if so, I hope maybe we can set it up that it could be a bypass. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Margie. Are there any other public questions?
Sean, just one little comment. Margie made a good. It was a little bit of a learning curve, but everything was there on the website. All the normal the documents you post there for the meetings. So yeah, it was fine. It was good. A little learning curve, but it's all right.
Thanks, Doug. I mean, Derek's still working on this with staff to, continue to populate the history of documents. I'm not sure every single thing he's intending to upload is there yet, but it is a work in progress. And if you find something that you're looking for, if you don't find something you're looking for, just shoot him an email. And if something's not functional on the website, that there might be a couple of bugs or whatever, just let us know, please.
Yeah. So you did prior have the old supervisor meeting minutes going back to 1999, which was useful to have. So if
they'll be posted, they'll be posted right now. I go back to 2015. I just didn't have time to upload the archive yet.
That's okay.
Yeah, they will be.
Thank you, Derek.
Yep.
Are there any other public comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Hughes, for a second. I'll make the motion. I'll second the motion. Okay, all in favor of adjourning the meeting at 10:01, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Good night,
Have a good
everybody.
evening or rest of the evening. Good night.
Have a good evening, everybody. Good night.